Good evening. Good evening, members of the public, visiting councillors, members of the Scrutiny Panel. Thank you very much for bearing with us. Unusually late to kick off. These things happen. My apologies. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening, but if the alarm does sound, please evacuate in an orderly fashion via the main staircase or the side staircase and rendezvous in the car park to the rear of the town hall. This meeting, as ever, is being recorded live, broadcast live over the internet and recorded for posterity so we can show our grandchildren. Discreet use of mobile phones is okay. If any noises go off, then you might get fined for the Mayor's charities. We are likely to break at 7:30 tonight, as I do anticipate it being a long meeting. Thus is the nature of the agenda that we have before us. I'm Councillor Darius Laws. I am one of the three councillors for Rural North Ward, representing the villages north of Colchester, and I'm the chairman here tonight. If I could start off by introducing everyone who sat at the table, we'll start over there on my left. Thank you.
Councillor Simon Appleton, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor Vanessa Moffat, Mile End Ward.
Lee Scordis, Old Heath, Ivan Rowhedge.
Councillor Jocelyn Law, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor Thomas Rowe, Rural North Ward.
Lucy Bredman, Strategic Director and Support to the Board.
Dennis Willits, Lexton and Braeswick Ward.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Chris Hartgrove, Deputy Section 151 Officer.
Councillor Mark Corey, Portfolio Holder for Resources. Good evening.
Councillor David King, Leader of the Council.
Councillor Natalie Summers, Portfolio Holder for Communities, Heritage and Public Protection.
Michelle Tarban, Head of Health Partnerships and Wellbeing.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, we have no substitutions here tonight that I'm aware of. There are no urgent items that I'm aware of. I will just use this moment, though, just to reflect that sadly, former councillor Mike Hardy, MBE, passed away recently. Mike was someone who served the residents of Lexton diligently. He was a man who, in a previous life, had fought for Queen and country. He was a warrior and he was a gentleman. And I just wanted to acknowledge our thoughts and love towards his friends and family at this time. He was my mentor, actually. I really like Mike. So we'll keep going, Mike. Thank you. Okay. Declarations of interest. Do I see any? I see Councillor Moffat and Ms. Councillor Appleton. Go for it.
Same for both of us, actually. Just wanted to note that we're both on the board of Colchester Commercial Holdings.
Noted for the minutes. Thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. I was about to commend the clerk for an excellent set of minutes, and then it occurred to me that he wasn't in that meeting and it was another member of the team. So great stuff that we are able to have backup like that and have such a great set of minutes. I'm happy to recommend we approve them. Is everyone happy with those minutes from December? Thank you very much. The amendments are to be add a section of each set of minutes noting the approval of the previous minutes. Yeah, okay, great. Item 6, General Have Your Say. We have, I believe, 2 pre-registered speakers. Thank you very much for pre-registering. So in the order that's on my piece of paper here, I will invite, please, first of all, Miss Cooper to come to the front desk there. You have your 3 minutes. We'll do our best to respond, and then you can respond again. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Councillor King has mentioned how very accountable he and the council are. Council's accountability seems to be another doesn't do what it says on the tin scenario. I'd be interested to know how this is to be achieved in practice, as the public observation and feedback would demonstrate an accountability deficit embedded in our governance system. One only has to Google list UK government scandals to recognise that serious lack of accountability has been going on for far too long. Indeed, was my driver to speak at council. Officers behind the scenes make decisions and steer councillors. Where is their accountability? The chair of the Scrutiny Panel admits to having no effective powers. Libelous comments of far-right extremists and conspiracy cranks are bandied about on social media by councillors, seemingly unanswerable to this misconduct in public office. The monitoring officer works for the council. Independent persons tend to come from other councils. Bias is to be expected from those marking their own work. Ombudsman's powers are limited, so they aren't able to hold the council fully to account. Councillor King was asked to clarify any lawful basis for the searches as a condition of entry. He responded by saying, "I'm not going to have an attempt to try and establish who, around the table or away from this place, is responsible for what set of conditions. I appreciate that middle-aged women in cardigans revealing unwanted information that could cause discomfort to the councillors may be viewed as fearful, but I'm not sure that necessitates a body and bag search at the taxpayer's expense every time I come to have my say." Demonstration material is being searched for. Demonstration is defined as an act of showing that something exists or is true by giving proof of evidence. Interesting that this is not allowed. Perhaps that is why the experts on climate change were not allowed to speak via Zoom. Council would then have evidence publicised that demonstrates the absolute folly of net zero central government is pushing us towards. A member of the public was shut down and police called to have him removed. Although some stated his speech to be vexatious, I found it insightful. New rules for Have Your Say mean that speeches need to be approved. Who gets to choose who is allowed to speak in this council's definition of democracy? Councillor King made a false statement about the safety of 5G. The monitoring officer agrees that the word safe isn't used anywhere in the documentation. We are still waiting for a retraction and correction. So far, no accountability on that, nor the 360 debacle, the 360 debacle. Recently, there's been the wasting of yet more taxpayers' money. How is it even possible to have a tax bill for £375,000 for a council-owned company that made a loss? So it seems that council or councillors or council officers are not required to justify their actions or decisions and are not responsible for results or consequences. Is anyone? Thank you.
I probably will divert to the leader, but I'm going to say a few words. First of all, I agree with you on £400,000 going to HMRC in that scenario is not a good look, is it, at all? So I agree with you on that one. On the Have Your Says, there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance between us being effective in here and giving the public a platform to have their say. So it's striking the right balance. That's just my observation. On the bag searches and potential body searches, I'm just going to double down on what I think I previously said. I support the administration. I'm the chairman of Scrutiny. I support the administration in their direction to officers doing that, because I think that on balance, most people in here take comfort in knowing that people are searched on entry into the building. And if I may say, if they'd been a bit better at searching bags in the West End last night, we wouldn't have seen Just Stop Oil people jumping on stage and disrupting culture and art for people in their cause. So, you know, bag searches can be effective if used properly. On your specific point about material for demonstrations. And finally, you know, all of us in here who are elected to be the part-time junior politicians that we are, you know, we're all bound by the Nolan principles in public life. Some people have been before the Standards Committee before for saying things on the internet that have been, you know, not perhaps in line with those principles. So there is that over our shoulders, and we all do our best. But I will, because you've raised some specifics, look to the leader to see if he wants to add anything or not. It's over to you, leader.
Thank you, Chair. You've covered most of the points I would want to make, but my name was mentioned a few times. Perhaps I'll just say that I'm in the same position. I know this clearly isn't your view that you suggest that we're beyond accountability, but it doesn't feel that way. The electorate hold us accountable, and we work within a legal statutory framework, and I know that some people don't like that, don't agree with it, but it is what it is. Whatever is the law of the land and the governance of the land, we do our very best to live within it. And as somebody who's been involved and hasn't always felt very fruitful in lots of exchanges, around controversial subjects such as 5G. I've been prepared to accept that my phrasing could have been different, and I put my hand up to that, and I spent personal time and effort, and it is a choice in going back to people to try and find an understanding. And I actually spoke in full council to acknowledge a difference where I could have taken perhaps a better choice of words. I tried to choose them well, and in that sense to be both helpful and informative. So this is the art of the possible within a legal and statutory framework. Our intentions are honourable here. We recognise our duty to the public, personally and collectively, and we do our best to exercise it. And I think that's probably all I can say. Thank you.
Ms Cooper, you can respond.
Isn't it interesting that the balance seems to always sway towards the favour of the council? The reason why we keep coming back is because we aren't getting answers that are satisfactory, and there isn't an accountability, and what it seems like is actually we're trying to be hindered from coming and making the council accountable. Councillor King only seemed to retract when legal action was threatened. I had provided evidence that 5G was unsafe and suggested to the Councillor King he could retract that in the previous full council. He chose not to. So I am suggesting that your phrasing was inaccurate, and by not retracting that at the first time of requesting, you're being deliberately misleading. We are not living under the rule of law, but international rules-based system, and this is why there is becoming a conflict between the public, who are no longer interested in the divisions between left and right, but are seriously concerned about the right and wrong that's going on within our governance system. Things are going to need to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As ever, your comments are being recorded as a matter of public record. You've been live on the internet and you're there for the future. I'll now call upon our second Have Your Say speaker, Ms Murphy, please.
Before I start, can I just say it's very off-putting to see the leader of the council rolling his eyes when a member of the public is speaking, so I hope you're going to treat me with more respect. Thank you. Right, I'm going to have to go quickly now in my 3 minutes. Okay, so good evening. Mercury Theatre receives £170,000 a year of council funding. Since 2023, I've been raising many safeguarding concerns, including the Mercury platform in children's performers whose material incites violence against women and includes sexually explicit, developmentally inappropriate and politically divisive content. Attempts to hold the Mercury to account through elected representatives have proven ineffective. I raised these concerns during last year's budget process, but the council failed to act. Since then, the Mercury has issued an intimidating, discriminatory and defamatory public statement policing the speech of women with lawful views on child safeguarding and violence against women, labelling as dangerous hate mongers. It's continued to allow unrestricted access to its toilets, leading to an ongoing police investigation into threatening behaviour by a man in the women's toilets. We're told to use the disabled if we feel unsafe. It's persisted in socially transitioning children in its youth groups without parental knowledge or consent, contrary to NHS and schools guidance and the CAST review recommendations. As a parent raising safeguarding concerns, my experience has been of being misled, smeared and harassed. Last March, I had to report the Mercury to the police over concerns for my safety. This escalated to my arrest on allegations of harassment and criminal damage. My home was searched, my DNA tested against stickers, my phone confiscated for 11 weeks, and I was barred from entering a whole area of the city before the CPS rejected these bogus allegations. The video of my arrest has been viewed 1.6 million times on X, damaging Colchester's reputation and undermining the council's pledge to work with partners to create a vibrant city which people want to live in and visit. The law prohibits charities from engaging in political activism outside their objectives, yet the Mercury board of 9 men and 3 women fails to reflect the council's aims for diverse and representative governance. Surveys show strong public support for single-sex spaces, but the Mercury disregards this and the law, compounding risks to women and children. Your public sector equality duty requires you to have regard for the elimination of discrimination, harassment and victimisation, the fostering of good relations between protected groups, and considering negative impacts on protected groups in all decisions. I ask the Council to commit to these 4 actions. 1, conduct a thorough review of the Mercury's compliance with its grant funding agreement. 2, consider alternatives for the £170,000, prioritising services that directly benefit residents or supporting businesses that respect the law and their customers. 3, introduce safeguarding and equality quality audits for grant recipients and strengthening mechanisms for accountability. And 4, invest in high quality training on equality law. Misunderstanding equality law has contributed to systemic failures nationally, disproportionately affecting women and children. In the midst of an epidemic of violence against women and children, Colchester's funding must prioritise safety, fairness and respect, not division and harm. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming along to have your say. As I said to the previous speaker, your words are being noted as a matter of public record. You have just been broadcast live on the internet, and that video will be there in perpetuity. I'll try and respond a little bit as best I can. I'm personally, not someone that spends too much time going to cabaret or drag artist, performance artist things. That's not something that I typically do with my spare leisure time. Equally, you won't find me in the queue to see the Dream Boys at Charter Hall. But who am I to deny people who want to see that kind of performance? It's not for me to call it. But the thrust of what you've suggested is around safeguarding concerns. So I am, as a parent, naturally concerned, and I listen intently to what you said. And I think probably actually you raise an area which I feel a bit ignorant on, because as an authority, obviously grants are given to organisations to create events, to put on performances and what have you, and that's Thursight, that's the Mercury Theatre, that's Colchester Arts Centre. I mean, we even have events in our museums, which are also publicly subsidised, albeit to a very small amount. So I would hope that any grant funding or frankly, any partnering that this authority has with any third party, and I can think very clearly about the recent situation with the volunteering sector, that we take assurance that safeguarding practices are good and that equalities legislation, probably Human Rights Act as well, is respected. How that happens mechanically and technically, whether there is an agreement, you've suggested potentially retrospective audits. I don't know if we do anything at the moment, and I'm going to look to probably Mrs. Bredman in the room as a senior officer, who I know has always been very helpful in supporting the portfolio holder for culture over the years. Is there a mechanic in place that we can take comfort in knowing that money is given to organisations to do things that are appropriate and respects basic safeguarding, for example? Could you give us a brief insight, if you may, and then obviously I'll let you come back.
Yes, so the 3 art grants that we give out, there is a process every year where we do a funding review. The portfolio holder and I will start that process next week with the 3 partners. There is a funding agreement as well in place. There is a requirement for safeguarding and equality and diversity policy to be in place. And indeed, you'll remember yourselves that scrutiny, usually annually, is going to be biannually as well. You do actually scrutinise our arts partners and the funding that they receive. So that's the kind of mechanism for us to check the funding specifically for the arts. Is that, I don't know if the portfolio holder or leader wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks for coming along, Geraldine. So I have looked through your complaints, but as I say, the complaints have been investigated by the Mercury, and I've used their published complaints procedure and engaged with senior staff and trustees in the process. They've been keeping us informed at every stage. So you've been asked before if you would raise these complaints with the Charity Commission. Have you done that yet?
It's the responsibility of the trustees of the Mercury to self-refer to the Charity Commission. There's no responsibility upon me. Your responsibility as funders is to uphold your public sector equality duty. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. The Charity Commission is just a distraction, and it has nothing, it's not relevant to you.
That was the recommendation to you, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Very briefly, if you want to respond to me, but I am being generous here.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things. I'm not talking about adult entertainment here, which is what you mentioned. And having a policy is not evidence of having good practice. The policy is inadequate, but the practice is much more inadequate. And bringing them here once a year to mark their own homework is also inadequate, because all they do is come and tell you about all the good things that they do. That's not what the public sector equality duty is about. And it's not true what you said about the complaints and the complaints process. It's absolutely not true.
Okay, thank you for coming along to have your say. As I said earlier, your words have been recorded. I've heard them. Thank you very much. All right. Item 7, decisions taken under special urgency provisions. I'm unaware of any. Item 8, cabinet or portfolio decisions called in for review. There are none. Item 9, requested items from members of the panel. There are none. And therefore, we will move on to item 10. No problem. Forgive me. I've printed off a note that's been changed today, so we're going to do something different. We were going to have the portfolio holder for culture, but we're not going to do that because we have members of staff that have needs, so that's fine. What we're going to do, I think, is therefore welcome Councillor Corey for a presentation, albeit a very brief one, around his portfolio before we get into the discussion of the budget. Okay, just to be clear. So, Councillor Corey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to double check with Andrew Small, who is online and having to go to another meeting at the same time, what time you need to leave, Andrew, because you want to speak on the budget item in particular. I just want to check.
Thank you, Chair. Probably absolute latest would be 7:22. I need to get away for another scrutiny meeting here at Epping.
Thank you. I feel it's probably right that Andrew makes his comments about the budget now, if that is okay to you, Chair. Andrew, I think the best thing as Section 151 officer is to give your steer on the budget paper, because I am to be scrutinised as a portfolio holder, and that could take 10 to 20 minutes, but depending. So I think it's best for you to come in now, if that's okay, Chair. We'll sort of take his comments, and perhaps there could be a response, or we take his comments and then we come back to it. Thank you. Andrew.
Apologies, Chair, and apologies to the whole committee, actually, in that case, really. It's unfortunate that I have a budget scrutiny meeting at Epping Forest tonight as well at the same time, so I need to be away for that one. And Ms Hartgrove will capably help the portfolio holder through the presentation of the budget. But there were some things I just perhaps wanted to say to the committee, really, by way of probably explanation and clarification as well, I think. And just to perhaps remove any confusion that exists, really. I think the first thing to say is that there is a legal duty to present a balanced budget, and this paper presents that to the committee this evening. To be clear about that, the budget are the numbers for 2025-2026. That is the only budget that is being presented to the committee tonight, and that informs and allows the council tax to be set. The rest of the numbers and the rest of the years that are presented are a financial forecast to help the council and members of the council to understand what the financial future potentially holds based around a series of assumptions and projections. It is not in any way, of course, an accurate reflection of what the future holds, because we don't know that. But it is there to help steer the council in terms of its financial planning. And so it's useful so that if the council is faced with financial challenges in future years, to know those well in advance, so it can create plans and courses of action to address those. So I think it's been portrayed that the council is presenting an unbalanced budget because there are future financial years which aren't balanced at this point in time. And that's absolutely not the case. And I think that's a misunderstanding of what is being presented to the committee and its purpose. As part of this meeting, I did look back on previous years' medium-term financial forecasts that have been presented to Colchester City Council in the past, over the last 10 years. And I think every single one of those medium-term financial forecasts also shows a deficit that needs to be addressed. And this year's deficit is probably no more an average in any of those previous 10 years. So it's a normal set of circumstances to look to the future and realise that there is a financial challenge that needs to be addressed, and that it's really part of working in local government, I would say. And it's based upon that, it's for the administration and for the officers to come up with a course of action or a series of plans to address that. And that is what happened. I think there's concern that if we didn't, or we failed to address those financial challenges, then the council would ultimately end up drawing down on its reserves and end up in a position where it had no more reserves to utilise. But if I compare our current reserves position and the reserves position over the last few years with the medium-term financial forecast that we've looked at over the last few years, whilst there's always a gap in the medium-term financial forecast, our reserves have been steadily increasing, which demonstrates, I think, to the committee that the council has been successful in terms of presenting balanced budgets each year and addressing the challenges that were foresawn. So I think that's important to understand. The other thing, of course, is to recognise that the budget is a set of assumptions, and in fact, quite a lot of assumptions. One thing we can be fairly sure of is that most of those will be wrong at some level. But it's important that we do at least make some assumptions, something that we can allow ourselves to be monitored against, so we know, using our projection of in-year performance, how they performed against the assumptions that we took when we set the budget. It's important, I think, when we develop the budget to set a set of assumptions, and then, as far as we can, stick to those, recognising that our assumptions and the factors which influence them will be constantly changing. So, we have to draw a line at a point in time to arrive at a savings target that needs to be identified so we can start planning for it. As soon as we set an assumption, it becomes out of date. But as I say, we have to fix it at a point in time to enable us to plan for budget setting purposes. And so there's a danger, I think, in saying that those assumptions are at a micro level individually wrong. I think what we need to do as a committee is look at it in totality and try and gain assurance whether the overall budget package that's presented presents a fair assessment of where we are at this point in time, something that the council can work within. And I would say, as your Section 151 officer, I believe that is the case, and the budget is robust. And I will say that in the statutory report I have to make to council, the Section 25 report that goes alongside of the budget. That's probably all I wanted to say. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you very much. I saw Councillor Rowe's hand go up very quickly, so we've got a few minutes, not many. Go for it.
Thank you. Just one quick question. You said in the statement that we had a long-running medium-term deficit, and that we've been effectively running a sort of a medium-term deficit for some considerable time. So I'm assuming to plug that deficit, we have been using the reserves, yet at the same time, you also stated that reserves had been increasing over the last 10 years. I don't understand how those two statements equate. Could you give us a bit more information into how we can run a deficit, balance a budget, and then at the same time have the reserves increase?
If I may, Chair.
Andrew, if you want it.
Thank you. So I think whenever you look into the future, and the further you look into the future, the kind of more unknowns that you kind of identify, and the more uncertainty there is. So the further you go out within your medium-term financial forecast, you usually find that the larger the deficits are. But as you get closer to those individual years, if I was to look for 28, 29 now, I'd identify a deficit because all I can see is problems. But as we get closer to it, work commences on finding solutions to that. And when we get to 28, 29, I have confidence to say to you that we will present in that year a balanced budget, because we will have found solutions to the problems that we can see exist today. So yeah, it's because it's a forecast and an opportunity for us to try and work out what the future holds. That gives you the time to plan for it and come up with solutions. And when you arrive at that point, you've identified the solutions to mean that you don't have an unbalanced budget in that particular year. And the council has been successful in doing that in all of the last 10 years. Every time we get to the budget, which is the forthcoming year, we'll have found a set of solutions that enables the council to deliver a balanced budget, which is why reserves have been increasing, because we haven't been using them to balance budget gaps.
Okay, I'm just going to bring in the Deputy Section 151 Officer first of all, Tom, before I come back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm going to present the report in a minute, and it's up to you whether you go into that detail now, but I am going to cover in detail the point that you just made. So if you bear with me, Councillor Rowe, I will cover that.
Thank you. We'll take that. Councillor Willits, I think you would like to say something.
Yeah, Chairman, an observation which Mr. Smalls may wish to respond to. The whole of life is one big assumption. Everything we do, from buying a house, going to the supermarket, we make assumptions about what it is we need to do. We take the best assumption we can. Sometimes we even go into the maths of putting confidence limits on the assumptions so that we know whether we can trust the assumptions and the degree to which we can trust them. So I was just a little surprised to hear the downplay of the reliance on carefully chosen assumptions to underwrite the budget, which is what I thought I heard. The law, as I understand it, and you'll correct me if it's wrong, only really obliges us to look 1 year ahead. That is our statutory duty, to look at 1 year ahead and balance the budget or follow the council tax calculation methodology, if we wish to be correct. But any prudent authority surely is going to look ahead, because the decisions we take this year will have an impact on the future, and what we want to happen in the future will therefore have an impact on what we do this year. It's sort of a reciprocal process. So I just sit here in amazement that the idea that assumptions can't be trusted, and that we may make assumptions, but on the second day of the financial year, we're no longer doing the best we can because the assumptions may have changed, seems to undermine the whole of the process that we have for budgeting. So I remain confused, but perhaps you can sort of allay my confusion.
And I appreciate, Andrew, this is probably the last moment we'll have together tonight, but it's yours now.
No, wise words from the councillor, actually, and I entirely agree with him, actually. I mean, there's two things in there, really. I think, the further you look into the future, the more uncertain your assumptions become, really. That's the reality of the situation is, that the more inherent compounded assumptions you have to make to arrive at a future state. The closer you get to the point in time, the firmer your assumptions can become. Now, I think we use the best assumptions and the best information that we have available to us to develop what is considered to be a robust budget. And I believe the numbers that we have used and the assumptions we've used for the forthcoming financial year are the best that they can be. But I would say, although I recognise the inherent problem in trying to anticipate what the future holds, I still believe it is really important that we do that exercise, because there are some things that you do know will be coming down the line because government policy changes, contract ends, whatever, that will be fiscal events for the council that it needs to consider well in advance. And the more warning you can have as an organisation to prepare for those fiscal events, then the more time you have to do something about it. So I think a medium-term financial forecast is not just a necessity. It's more than good practice. It's, as I say, it's something you must do as a responsible organisation. But equally, the further you go out into that forecast, there are probably things missing because there's things we don't know that we don't know at this point in time. Are overlaid on things that we know might happen, but we don't know to what extent they might impact us, and a degree of things that we do know. But you bring all of those together, it's important that you do that exercise so that you're not just travelling from one year to the next blindly. You have to look to the future so you can make adequate plans to deal with the challenges coming down the line. For example, one that will be drawn out within the detailed report, the government is going to introduce a new system of distributing grant from 26-27. And realistically, we believe that will be bad financial news for the organisation, but we don't know to what extent. But knowing that the bad news coming down the line means that you can start preparing and adapting for it, really, and that is the purpose of the medium-term financial forecast, and it's something that the members of the council should look at and take seriously, even recognising the inherent weaknesses in some of the assumptions that are built into it. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Okay. Andrew, thank you very much. We know you've got to go. We will motor through, though. Okay. Councillor Corey, thank you. Councillor Corey, since we last saw you...
Yep. Can I just make a point? From my perspective, no disrespect to the Deputy Section 151 officer, but I do find it quite disappointing that the Section 151 officer can't be at the meeting when we are discussing such a sensitive subject with, and I understand there might be external reasons for that, but I'd just like it noted that I think that it would be much better had we had the full array of people that we could ask questions to, and not just have questions for a few moments at the beginning of the meeting.
And I apologise if word didn't get to you as to why that has happened, but obviously we have a Section 151 officer who has dual responsibilities, and the diary management is such that the meetings clashed. And I am grateful that we had the Deputy Section 151 officer here. Councillor Corey, this is your moment to share an insight into your portfolio. I think since the last time we saw each other, you used to refer to Liz Truss quite a lot, and it would seem now that the gilt rate is higher than in her day, and we have a Labour government who's just whacked you for national insurance, which you're not necessarily going to recover all of, or I don't know, maybe you are. But that's a little bit of what I observed since we last saw each other, but you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot to observe, and it's a shame, isn't it, we don't have a Liberal Democrat government, because we wouldn't have any of those problems. But of course, I jest. I think we all have our issues and we all can address them as best as possible. And we should work together this evening to try and achieve that. So I sent in advance for you all, following, probably within about 45 minutes, following the Chair's briefing that I had with you, to ensure that I gave you an overview of my portfolio so you could then ask questions. So I'm going to rattle through this to kind of give you teasers that you can then ask me questions on. And at the end of it, you can spend as long as you like. But of course, we've got the budget sitting alongside, so I'll try not to go too much into the budget until we do that later. And of course, you've then got Nat Summers to scrutinise as well. So if we could go to the next slide. So that was a summary of the things I will dip into. You could go to the next slide again, please, Owen. So the local government finance sort of sector at the moment, we know is under pressure. We know across the country some councils have seen themselves having to declare a notice that they can no longer manage their finances and need to declare that publicly. We have some of those cases we've had in Essex, but we are nowhere near that. We are a well-functioning council, and we have to make the difficult decisions. We have made the difficult decisions, and we are continuing to make sure we are resilient into the future. So we do have those contextual pressures, and that is why we're having to carry out programmes such as Fit for the Future. That is why we're having to scale back on capital programmes. That is why we're publicly having to say that we have to reduce some services or look at different ways of providing services. As the Section 151 officer said earlier, we have a fairer funding review coming down the line. The government will look at that in 2026, 2027, and we perhaps may lose out, again, as the Section 151 officer predicts. We don't know for sure, but it could be that There are other areas that are more impoverished that the government might want to look into supporting to a greater extent compared to us. We also have, in the finance sphere, market forces applying to the finance sector itself. We're finding it harder to find people to come and work at local government premises, and we're having to look at how we do shared functions, etc. That's why we do have a sharing arrangement at the moment with Epping District Council, and we are looking to recruit an interim Section 151 officer into the future. But there are more interims out there, they cost more, there are less available officers, quite frankly. That is the basic situation we're in. We also find that difficulty when it comes to auditors as well, and getting the audit done on time has been an issue that's been discussed at length at the Governance and Audit Committee. So I don't suggest we go into that tonight, because we will continue to address that through Governance and Audit, but that has been a healthy and robust discussion. I wasn't at the last discussion, but always keep up to date with that, and will do. And that also does mean, and we're very much aware, that without fully audited accounts, we continue to make assumptions that our books are in the right order, but with a disclaimed account or with adjustments and views given by accountants, by the auditors, we would hope for getting back to where we were originally before COVID, when the auditors seemed to manage the situation. And finally, the government settlement remains uncertain. We've got almost everything sorted, but we still, as you alluded to earlier, need to know about the national insurance contributions. To begin with, we were comforted by government saying that they won't apply. In a sense, we will be comforted from that. We will be protected from that rise and supported with the rise, the cost of the rise of national insurance employee contributions. But that's changed, and we're yet to know the exact figure of the relief. What we've done is we've gone with a small c conservative estimate of 50% relief, which we believe would be the lowest end. We have not gone for a higher end of 75 or 80% relief. So again, in our budget, we are being conservative with it, we are being cautious with it. I hope it to be slightly different, I hope it to be better, and then we could see a sort of bonus in terms of our revenue implications there. I better speed up. So the budget, let's pass that one on by, and let's talk about that in 5 minutes' time. Next one, please, Owen. So just about the implications of the government policies, I've just referenced national insurance contributions. I actually need to respond to Councillor Dundas just to give my fullest answer about how it implies to us, but how the indirect costs will also imply to us. And service heads have had to understand the implication of national insurance upon contracts that we have and partnership working that we do. So there is a further knock-on cost indirectly to us, as well as the direct costs. So we still have to factor that in working forward. We also have to factor that in with our businesses and how that's affecting them in Colchester as well. Housing and homelessness, that's more of a positive side. The government said they would address that. They have given us an extra contribution of over £300,000 towards that. So that's a helpful inclusion in the budget for us from government. Another helpful inclusion is the extended producer pays contribution. Now that's something that has been going through government for a few years now, and I'm pleased by national government's movement on this, which is to address the packaging used on many products in retail, and to say that the producer needs to reduce the amount of plastic packaging. It's like a tax, like the sugar tax, to try and change behaviour of the producers. Why are we getting a contribution? Because we're the ones who collect the packaging and have to dispose of it or recycle it. So we get a contribution based on the amount that we are collecting. So we've put that into the budget, as we should. It helps support our waste service. But again, we are being cautious with that. We are not putting an estimate in there to say we're going to continue to get that amount, because like the sugar tax, if the behaviour of the producer changes, then actually the amount we will end up collecting and need to deal with will be less. So we need to be cautious about that going forward. Finally, something else we need to be very much aware of is local government reorganisation and devolution. which is coming down the line to us in Essex, and we need to understand how we work with other councils, how we look to provide joint services in the future, and how we ensure we're prudent and responsible going forward before we see the amalgamation of councils as is planned. Next up, reserves. We have spoken about reserves before, and we do so at governance and audit, and I'm happy to talk about them here as well. We have a prudent level of reserves, and we are above that comfortable level. We have been contributing to those over the years, and we have carried out a review of those last year, and we will have a further review of those in May to June this year. So we continue to review them and explain with as much clarity as possible what we have in allocated earmarked reserves and what we have in unallocated general fund reserve, which is for use for the council to spend, whether it be on emergency issues that come up or priorities that we have outlined in the budget. We have outlined and alluded to in the budget a number of areas we want to address spending money on, but we're very clear that it would be one-off capital spending, not on revenue creating projects, because we need to continue to reduce our revenue budget overall. Moving on, the capital programme. We've also undergone a review of the capital programme, which has seen some of the aspirations and ambitions with that reduce to actually ensure, bearing in mind the costs of borrowing, to ensure that we can manage a capital programme, also that we can deliver on the capital programme. It's been a bugbear of the leader as well to ensure that our capital programme is as tight as possible and does deliver. One thing that we have had complications with is the fact we hold the town deal fund that we receive from government and the levelling up fund that we receive from government, but it is not directly in our responsibility of delivery. So we are seeing some delays in delivery with partners and getting on with some of those projects that mean the capital programme has some slippage in it. So that would address the progress point, as well as some of our own slippage on some of our own projects. When it is our own projects and pausing and not carrying out projects, we benefit from not carrying borrowing costs, we benefit from not carrying MRP, but also when they delay, we can have a positive effect in terms of financing and not borrowing, and actually by having cash in the bank that's getting interest rather than having spent it. But in terms of the town deal and the levelling up funding, that doesn't really apply because it's not necessarily our direct money. Okay, almost there. Assets and corporate landlord model is the next slide. So most of you will be aware we've transitioned to a corporate landlord model way of running our assets and looking after our estates to make sure we are as sharp as possible in owning our assets or leasing them out, building new assets, investing in assets to create a greater income like we have done near Rowan House at M401 and M402, generating a good deal and a good base for local businesses, but also looking at disposal of assets and seeing if we are not using them, if we're not using them to our best ability, is it worth disposing of those? Does it reduce other liabilities? Does it reduce the costs we're carrying if it's an asset that we invested in with a borrowing implication to it, or is it something that just is worth disposing to either a local community or to a developer? So at the moment, the estate members steering group has been created, which brings in a cross-party influence, and it really is a positive move forward to ensure that we're working together, because the estates is such a fundamental part of the council's assets and the council's economic prosperity. We are working together to review the officers' work, consultants' work that we go to in the market sometimes, to find out what we should do with our assets. Some of that will be about investing in them. One of them will be this town hall itself. We need to address the town hall. It needs work, but we also need to address the long-term future of it. And not only will the members steering group look at that, we'll have a separate workshop on that, bringing in more members, because it's quite a civic and important building for us all. And lastly, in that area, the voluntary and community sector asset framework, understanding that we own lots of pieces of land. It could be that we want to give back a piece of land to a parish council to look after instead of us. And also, we are talking about community assets that are quite large, such as First Sight, Mercury, the Arts Centre, ones that we either own or have a long lease with. We need to understand that we're treating them all fairly and consistently. So we are ensuring the council and the taxpayers are getting value for money, but also the community is being looked after in terms of social value. Next up and last slide from me is about the sort of more operational side of finance under my portfolio, led ably by Sam Preston, who has done a good job in terms of reorganising some of our teams, our collection teams. So with the local council tax support, we have moved to a banded system, which means much less complication for both the resident and the team. And that means we've been able to move some of that team to address other areas of peaks that need dealing with within the other collection teams. We are doing well on collection of council tax and collection of business rates. We have one of the days that we do about quarterly where we hit the phones and get out there with collection on council tax and business rates to ensure that we're keeping up to the KPI indicator of getting in as much as possible each year, which we do hit very well. And we sometimes get rewarded by government when we collect over and above our estimated KPIs. And on business rates, sadly, that is going to be a focus over the next few weeks and months, as business rate relief has been reduced for retail and leisure and hospitality. And we're having to work with businesses now to make sure they're prepared for that reduction in relief that was in place, but now will now be reduced. I'll leave it there, Chair, because I know I've already gone on, and you've had the slides before, so you can definitely ask me questions on those areas. Thank you.
I'll kick it off before I open it to the floor. Thank you very much, Councillor Corey. Obviously, you referenced there the peer review, and it was said, wasn't it, within the peer review that focus needs to be put on the capital projects, and also that probably it might be a good idea if we considered all-out elections, which would save a little bit of money. It looks like we won't need to make that decision, because it looks like that decision might be being made elsewhere. So the question I've got for you to open up this evening and warm you up really is, how do you add personal value to some of the decision making? Because I know you're going to have people coming onto your door saying, look, you know, unlike Chelmsford, Colchester's got amazing heritage and we want to spend money and make the most of it, investing in it to bring tourists here, unlike Chelmsford. You might have people knocking on your door saying you're not doing enough to get more sustainable and green. Some people might say, be pragmatic and don't move too quickly and bankrupt yourself. But you might have people knocking on your door. I don't know what conversations they had in this place in private and in cabinet in private. How do you make judgment? How do you decide how you can influence and add impact and add value with your knowledge of this organisation, given that you have been here for quite a while?
Thank you. Yes, 18 years, boy and man. So I think that the experience is helpful, having done the role in the resources portfolio before, done the role of leader of the council. So I understand the different areas within the council, and sometimes they are competing. I fully understand that we could invest so much more into areas such as business, culture, heritage, but we need to find that right balance between using council taxpayers' money for that, keeping a prudent level of reserves in place and keeping our revenue under control. I do think we have managed the finances and the reserves well enough that we will be able to make investments and continue to make investments into our town, and also to attract in external investment. We've done very well at that, and I praise the officers for that work. So that's where I like to be as tight as possible with the finances. If we can get other contributions in, then we can maximise that investment into heritage or into business support or into sport and leisure like we have. So I feel my experience works well there, and relationships with officers has always been good, understanding the roles that they do, pushing where we can, understanding when They have been pushed far, and the organisation is lean, and it is lean at this point in time, and that is due to pressures contextually, I would say. So understanding with those relationships where and when to push as much as possible, and embedding better processes. So in my time previously as a resources portfolio holder, and now I have seen better processes put in place. The corporate landlord model is one example of that. So being absolutely firmly behind that as portfolio holder and pushing that forward. For example, we interviewed for a director of estates, and that was a cross-party board, and we decided we did not want to proceed with any of the candidates that we had. We did not feel we had a good enough potential officer there to lead the department. We have been spoilt with Patricia Barry as a very sharp officer. She is an interim at this point, but we are hoping to keep her longer as a result of not recruiting, because we see her as excellent, want to hold on with her. But there's implications of that. There's a cost to that. But what I'm trying to say is I will work with others, I work with that cross-party board to make sure we get the right people in the right jobs. And if we can't, we will not just employ anybody. And under Patricia, we're seeing the right processes being put in place so we can deal consistently with our assets and we can derive the best possible returns for the taxpayer. And I say that means I will absolutely look logically at whether we dispose of assets, whether we invest in assets, whether we look at longer leases, etc. Everything is open on the table. And I do feel we've been as transparent as possible, bringing in wider membership to those groups. So those are kind of the ways in which the leader and I both believe that sort of being transparent, bringing in wider groups, we can deal with the problems in front of us, deal with them in a consistent way, deal with them with experience and facts and logic, and the experience is an added bonus.
Thank you for that. And I think it was good to hear you reference the leverage opportunity, because actually, for example, it's a bit salient this evening, but in giving small grants to some partner organisations, they leverage, in some cases, hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And we've seen it with the Heritage Lottery Fund recently on Jumbo, haven't we? You know, so there we go. Okay, I saw Councillor Moffat, you had your hand up in your own time.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions really to address some possible misconceptions. So the first one's around council tax. If you could give us an idea of roughly how much of that comes into local council to actually spend on our residents. And then the second one was about the business rates framework and how much control or not that we have around that pricing.
Thank you, Vanessa. So both points I can address at my level, and Chris perhaps can address in even more detail if he wants to support on that. So in terms of council tax, we collect it in. We are the tax collector in this case, and I think it's confusing often for residents. They think we are the go-to, and you could say with government reorganisation, unitary authorities, that might take away some of that confusion. So we take in the council tax, and then we only keep 11% of that. So Colchester only keeps, I think, 11. I mean, it's between 10 and 11 point something. So it depends on the year, I suppose. But 11% is all we keep. So that's quite a small amount for what we provide. And I live in a parish area, so I also pay a precept to a parish. So it depends where you live, but that is the contribution in that sense. With the business rates, government set the vast amount of the framework of business rates. They also then set the amount of relief that we as councils can disseminate, give out. So we again are the tax collector in that sense. We collect the business rates in, and that goes off to government. But we have, and Chris, maybe I'll come to you to explain the pooling arrangements where we have managed to actually keep more within Essex, which was something that when I was previously portfolio holder years ago, we took an opportunity to become part of that pooling, and we have benefited, and that's why the benefits have been seen in the business rate reserve of that building up in a positive step each year. So with business rates, we very much have little to nothing in terms of what we can do about them. We can, or during COVID, for example, we had more flexibilities on how to use that relief. Now those flexibilities, we have to follow government. So the papers that are outlined with the budget report as well are about the business rate relief changes and how we're simply going to have to just follow the government changes in policy, which I said was a reduction in the relief. So unfortunately, we will be working with businesses who are going to be having less of a relief on their business rates. We'll support them as best as we can, but we won't be able to do that financially. Chris, is there anything about business rates you'd want to explain further?
I think that was a pretty good summary. I think the only thing I would add, I think, around business rates, as Councillor Corey says, there's very little that we can do at the margin. I think we are rewarded in terms of our business rate growth, and Colchester's been very successful over the years there, but that's subject to, in isolation, if the council acted alone, it would be subject to a 50% government levy on growth. But because it acts as a pool, it's a complex arrangement where basically the levy is levied on the pool. So different districts in Essex, billing authorities, should I say, have different growth rates in business rates, the different amounts they collect. When you look at it as a pool, we're able to reduce our business rates levy, and that's what's known as a pooling gain. So we make every year we make a six-figure sum from the pooling gain through being in the Essex pooling agreement. It's a very volatile figure because it not only depends on business rates within this billing area, Colchester, but it also depends on everybody else in Essex. So that figure goes up and down each year, and that's one of the reasons why the council operates the business rates reserve, which is a smoothing reserve to stop that volatility. So that's the only thing to say.
Okay, I see Councillor Appleton, I see Councillor Willits and Councillor Law.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Mark, how is the corporate landlord model going to be different, and how is it going to deliver better management of council assets?
Thank you, Simon. I think I tried to explain as much as possible in my presentation, but I really like the fact we've got a members of states group now, so we can work together and we can have a better understanding of what we've got. So first of all, it's having a better understanding of our assets. So we've been developing an asset register for some time, and actually to have one that we can all grasp and get hold of, that's one thing. So a corporate landlord model is getting that to be the most accurate we've ever had it as an asset register, so that's a positive. And then it's investigating every one of those assets as best as possible. And we've, of course, got a hierarchy. We're not going to investigate 10-foot square of grass compared to a big business development that we could be working on. But we are absolutely much more laser focused now on looking at, as I explained before, is that giving a good return to the taxpayer? Is there social value that we're getting from that? Is it a lease that is, again, delivering what we want economically, socially, etc.? Or is it something that actually we could dispose of that and we could sell that and get in capital income, or we could reduce revenue costs on that asset, or we could do a different leasing arrangement, however. And I just believe it makes it much easier for us as members to understand what is happening there. Also, it makes it more consistent for those we're working with, the partners we're working with. It also ensures that officers know. So when they're doing a report about if we're going to develop a certain asset, that they know what it currently is valued at, what it currently is delivering for us, and what are the potentials. So it's like having so much more information at our fingertips than we had before, and being more commercial about it, being more hard-nosed about it, quite frankly. And we can, when wanting to protect something for community benefit and for social, cultural benefit, we can know the value of it now. We can better understand the value of, okay, we will keep that and protect that and not dispose of it because we actually will get so many more benefits from that. So for me, that's what it's about, really, and having the right officers in place to do that professional job. And also we can do a bit more facilities management as part of it as well, or look at where we go out to the market, because that's also been an issue before. I think I know when speaking to councillors here before, philosophically, I've wanted to do as much in-house as possible, but I've realised there are issues with doing that, and we do need to look elsewhere, because we cannot sometimes bring in the professionals into the local government sector at the amount that we pay, and instead we have to go for expert and professional external consultancy or external providers.
Okay, Deputy Chairman and Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chairman. Despite what we were saying earlier on about the need for a nice, smooth future, which can be modelled mathematically, and we know exactly where we are, the thought of local government reorganisation, the word that comes to mind is chaos. And this is chaos which your portfolio is going to have to deal with, where it will be difficult to predict exactly where we're going to go. Colchester, although you probably disagree with me, is one of the wealthier cities. And it's possible that that will have an impact on the balancing of resources. And I just wonder what plans you have to do that. And if I might just exemplify why I describe it as wealthy, although we've been at MTFF shaming this evening, we have an MTFF. We make assumptions about how our costs are going to go up, and they seem to go up faster than our income every year. So we've always got a deficit, and at the end of every year, the Section 151 officer insists that we increase our prices, cut services to eliminate the deficit for the following year. If we sum up all those deficit reductions for the next 5 years, it would come to about £21 million. If we decided that we were not going to make cuts or increase prices, it means we would have to take some £21 million out of reserves. At that point, we would still have some £6 million in reserves. There would be some pain, of course, but we still have £6 million in reserve, twice what is required for the prudential rate. So others looking, although I would not ever advocate that, others looking at us might say, well, these are people who've got so much money in the bank, they could go on for 5 years without running out their balances. So what defence, what arguments are you going to use when we come to redistribution, or the government redistributes the ratio of assets to ensure that Colchester doesn't lose out?
Thank you. I'll try and start with your first points and then end with the last. So it's looking likely that we will have we're having government reorganisation. It's likely we'll end up with Tendring District Council and Braintree District Council. You could see an additional council added to that if we have 4 unitaries rather than 5. So it could be Malden, it could be Uttlesford. I would say that we are a comparator to Braintree in terms of our level of financial control and wealth. They are slightly smaller in terms of population, slightly smaller in terms of business rates, in terms of council tax collection, etc. So you are right, we are the bigger player here, and Tendring are smaller, and Tendring also have quite a mix and deprivation in certain areas. We know some of the most deprived parts of the country. So there would be, and needs to be, complete diligence going into this, and we were discussing this the other day. We need to be have oversight of the other council's finances, and we need to start working together now, and we will. So we were expecting a letter today. I haven't heard about its arrival yet, about the next steps, and they would mean working together and greater and stronger partnerships being formed that David could speak to, I'm sure. So a kind of shadow authority will develop But before that, we need to start working in partnership and talking to each other and looking at each other and saying, don't run down your finances and don't bring with you a problem. Don't bring a basket case along with you is a phrase I suppose some councils have been called. That is not us. And we definitely wouldn't look at running down the council finances, because we will still be here after all. We're still going to be, unless you want to move away, Dennis, we are still residents that are going to need housing. We're still residents who are going to need a waste service. We're still residents that are going to need play parks and the great things that these councils run, and a unitary authority. We will be part of that. So wouldn't want to create more problems for that future authority by not managing our finances properly. So in terms of medium-term financial forecasts, it's absolutely right that we continue to address those deficits that we forecast in the future. But we have got reserves, as you say, and I think it's about understanding how best to prudently move in partnership with the other councils, whilst ensuring we, as Colchester, having the privilege of running Colchester's administration, to make the investments in Colchester before Colchester Council comes to an end, to ensure we get the best for taxpayers. And I work with you on that, Dennis. I'll work with other councillors on that if I'm still in the role, because we'll probably have about 2 years or so, 2.5 to 3, in which to protect, conserve what's best about Colchester before we get amalgamated into a larger unitary authority. David, just wanted to add a bit more.
I think that's really well said, Mark, and with a question put to me, I'd hope I come up with that as eloquently as, I mean, there's a real frankness we have to have, which is, this is not of our making, but we will have to adapt as swiftly as we can. We're going to have to be really grown up. I've been in conversations with leadership across the county where colleagues have had a pushback at presentations in the wrong colour, indicating that one organisation or another is directing the path. The reality is that the decisions that are going to be made were always going to be made, frankly, in Whitehall. They still will be, but we will have a significant voice locally. We don't know yet what that decision is, and somebody's been around Whitehall, and we've all watched, haven't we, with interest at some of the ways in which decisions have been made. The most fundamental one is going to be whether government persuades itself, or parts of it, the Treasury, persuade themselves that really bigger unitaries are going to be the answer. And I find myself glancing at Labour colleagues, you've had a lot of input to this, but I think we all accept that decisions will get made at certain levels, but there's a lot of advice, a lot of engagement. So the most important thing for us, which we only have a limited influence, is going to be the shape and size of the unitaries. If somebody is persuaded, and the maths I've seen are unpersuasive, but if somebody decides that they are persuaded that 2 or 3 or 4 is different and better to 5, then that's what we're going to have to live with. So that's the first and most fundamental thing. The letter, the instruction, the response from government to the expression of interest, I hear it might be this weekend, but that's just me speculating. And when it might come, it will come. And we expect
tomorrow now. That's
MP. All right. And we expect to be in the priority programme in Essex. So, hear that word. There's a huge amount to be done, and I think I'm most troubled about the disruption and impact upon the day-to-day issues, which are really material that we're having to face at the moment. So we're looking forward to right to do that. The conversation, and Mark's answered it really well about our attitude and approach. It's a really great question. All of that's correct, but actually the challenge is going to be how we collectively deal with the near-term present, as well as go through an extraordinary change in which we're going to be melding at least 3 and possibly more authorities into one, and we'll want it to work effectively through that change. Now, I expect, a couple more remarks only, I'll stop. I expect that we will start to look within a year or so about what that means, because practically speaking, we need to narrow the differences and improve our understanding of what each does. And that's what our chief execs and officers are starting to do, starting to map that future. We know we'll have some relative strengths. It won't just be in what's in the bank. It'll be the ways in which we deliver a particular service. And then we're going to have a really interesting conversation. Waste is one of the most classic illustrations. We can all understand that. How difference is in service with a changing context, government rules. How's that going to be done when? Who might lead? So there's just going to be, I would focus, as if I was in your shoes in scrutiny, I will for us collectively with Mark and colleagues, be seeking to focus on how we manage that lengthy transition. But there will be floors and ceilings and rules and coming together, because we're going to have to be really grown up about how we manage it. One last thing is, when we look at wealth, income and reserves, we're going to have to look at what we raise in council tax, because there are differences in approach, not just in the service, but also how we raise money from our residents. And that also, we're going to have to find a way of equalising that over time. So it's going to be fascinating, but a really big challenge. We are lucky here. We have some really quality people, not only in the members and the debates we have, but in the officers who serve us, and I'll take some encouragement from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, for that intervention. I saw Councillor Law.
Thank you. I've got a question really centering around sort of our cultural and historic assets, and I guess some of this might sort of relate back to the corporate landlord model. You know, I know that sort of residents often say, oh, it's great, we've got such great history here, and how can we make more of it? And obviously, you know, it has a potential to boost the local economy. So I just wonder if you could say a bit more about the sort of challenges in terms of, obviously some historic assets can be very costly to maintain, so the balance in terms of them being able to get a sort of a return on that to help boost the city. And a second point really is about, you were touching on before about decisions around deciding how long to keep hold of certain assets or sites, and about, you know, the new Estates Committee. And I wonder if you could give me a bit of an idea about your views, perhaps, because certainly I feel that there are some sites that the council probably needs to keep hold of, so that we've got some kind of strategic oversight in terms of development of the city and the region and area in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So the first question is a million-dollar question, really. How do you find the right balance between investing in your assets that are historical and could attract more tourism, and therefore it would bring in money, economic growth for the town? It's often money we don't then see, because we may do the investment, but it's spread, the benefits are spread for businesses and for residents more than it is for us directly. So sometimes it's hard to make that analysis of exactly what we would get back when making those investments. But also in the recent climate, we've had to, unfortunately, make so many reductions and savings that we've been unable to put as much in, I think, to heritage and culture. However, I would say we have done some positive examples. I mean, the chair will remember, he talked about lighting up the walls, and we eventually did it. And I thanked him for his idea and made sure...
Almost all of the walls.
Most of them. Again, that's the cost. You can't do all of it. And Jumbo was mentioned earlier as well. So we sat around the table at the town deal when it was first talked about, and made sure we put aside a small amount of money to... small in the relative terms of the 20 million that we received, and actually worked with the then MP Will Quince on that one. And by putting in 500,000, we've managed to then support that bid going through, with commitments by the leader as well to say we could put in more in order to get something to work there. And lo and behold, we now have £8 million from National Lottery to invest in that building. We're pretty much there to get that project up and running, and that's something that our residents really care about, and it will have a really positive economic effect for Colchester. However, will there be some residents who say, why are we spending money on that? Well, the fact is we are spending a smaller amount of money for leveraging in more, so I think that in the cost benefit analysis works. There are other areas that we still have to make decisions on in terms of funding going forward. One of them, I mean, the castle remains a jewel in the crown, but next to it with holly trees and that museum. and there's covenants about that, how it was left to us, so you have to also have that detail in the background as what can we do commercially with these assets that we have. And the last one you can come back to is the town hall. We needed okay, thank you. We need a discussion about the town hall, because there is not just a historic value, there's a real civic and democratic value to it as well. So on that, we are bringing in members, and we'll show members all of the detail there to try and collectively come to a decision about the cost-benefit analysis of that going forward. The last thing I'll say is you've got local government reform also then coming into play. So how much, for example, with the town hall, do we need to keep this building for democratic reasons? And I know in your group and in my group and the Conservative group, there are different views on that about keeping or restoring or disposing of assets. What was it? Oh, yeah, so other assets, Colchester Northern Gateway, the leader was saying. So the estates members group at this point in time are looking at disposing of some of the sites up there relating to that wider Northern Gateway piece. But at the moment, up at the Northern Gateway, we've got the leisure facility, the sports park that's been completed. And then we've got the southern Colchester Northern Gateway. That's a piece of mixed development that we're working really focused on to make sure we get the best return out of that, both economically, commercially, for business in terms of growth, but also socially as well. What can we get out of that? So there is always that cost-benefit analysis, and with the corporate landlord model, we have much better data on it now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Members, are there any other questions for the portfolio holder, for the Chancellor of Colchester? This is the moment. No, okay. It's nearly 7:30. I propose that we do have a 15-minute break now so that we can return recharged, recaffeinated, and we can look at the budget. And I'll just leave you with this little cliffhanger, because I had a conversation on the way into this building today, and I was informed that it was Councillor Richard Wheeler who in the early 1970s suggested, when reorganisation last occurred, that Colchester should look north more. I thought that was a very interesting observation, and it's above my pay grade though, and I look forward to whoever decides what happens looking after the tribes around the Deben, the Orwell and the Stour. There we go. See you in 15. Okay, folks, welcome back to part 2 of tonight's scrutiny meeting. We're now going to move on to looking at the budget. And before we do that, we have a guest councillor who would like to have their 5 minutes. We then may get a response, and then that guest councillor will have another further minute. So, Councillor Sunix, would you like to come up and join us, please? And I understand you have circulated some paperwork around as useful reference to what you may be speaking of. And I also, for context, should just point out that you have been positively engaging over a number of days with the leadership and with the Chancellor of Colchester around matters in the budget, and it is your profession, and so you do it with an aim to be constructive. So, Councillor Sunix, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, and I would like to thank officers for the help they've been giving us on our opposition budget amendments, and I'd also like to thank Councillor King for engaging in, I know how busy he is, engaging in quite a lot of detail on this, so thank you. I think that this evening the scrutiny panel has a really, really important job. We've had an hour and a half of words, and now I think we really need to look at the numbers. So I've handed out a sheet with the numbers, and I'd like to draw your attention to some figures, and we need to really sharpen up on actually what the plan is and what we're going to do about it. Because there we have a number of 7.9 million in the bottom right-hand corner on the first sheet I've given you. Is everyone sort of with me?
This is the structural deficit figure.
This is the structural deficit line, the bottom line, 7.9 million. That's the difference between the income we get, the total funding, 29.7 million, and the expenditure, 37.6 million. That's if it's a household, that's your salary coming in on the one side and your expenses coming out. And you're running your reserves down low. The jam jars, the reserves sitting on the shelf in your kitchen are being drawn out in that year, 7.9 million. Well, that's a long way away. So let's look at next year. We've got a deficit of a structural deficit of 3.1 million. We need to be planning for that. This year, it looks as if we've got a structural, or we're able to contribute 87,000 to funds. I'm not going to go on too much about that. There's some questions about some of the assumptions in there, but broadly, it looks as if we might be okay for next year. It's about the years after that matter. And we've heard an awful lot this evening about how the MTFF, the later years, don't really matter. They're just an indication. They're not to be taken seriously. I just disagree with that. I think the budget, as Councillor Willits has already said, is about making a consistent set of forecasts. And it's even more important than that, because it's not legal. It's against the SIPFA Prudential Code to be doing large amounts of capital expenditure when you don't know you can afford the repayment. So this is your household that's running into deficit. It's not got a deficit now, but it can see the deficit coming ahead, and it's saying it's going to go out and it's going to buy a top-of-the-range Range Rover without knowing where it's going to pay the lease payments from. That's what I think is wrong with it in the general fund. There's a similar but slightly different problem in the HRA. So I think, and the answer we seem to be getting is, oh, well, we've fixed the problem in the past. We've always managed to fix the problem in the past, and we've been contributing to the reserves in the past. So during the little tea break, instead of having a cup of tea, I jotted down the reserves that what's happened to our reserves. And I've taken the general fund plus the earmarked reserves, which are the only things that you're likely to be able to use against your deficit. And during the COVID years, the reserves did build up. There were these big Section 31 payments the government gave the council, and we built up our reserves. And at the end of 2021, those two reserves totaled 38 million. 2022, 35 million. 2023, 30 million. 2024, 29 million. They've gone down every year for the last 3 years. We're doing a lot of complicated accounting, but I don't think we're balancing our books. And looking ahead, we're in no way balancing our books, and we need to, now the job of the scrutiny panel this evening, would I tell you what to do? I might like to suggest what you might like to do. I think you need to be asking hard questions about what are they going to do? What are they going to cut? What extra income are they going to get? If they're using reserves, this is the most important question of all, if they're using reserves, which reserves they're going to use. And I would ask you to turn the page and have a little look at the reserves there. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of small figures on it, but you can see down the left-hand column, there's a list of reserves that we've got. And I've gone down, I've chosen those ones that I think are reasonably usable against the ongoing structural deficit. It's about 12 million. It's not the 29 or 30 million we've been talking about. It's about 12 million. If you're going to go outside those ones, you need to tell us which ones they're going to the deficit's going to come out of. Which jam jar? Is it going to come out of the revenue grants unimplied? You're going to use that one, or the repairs and renewals reserve, when we've just been told we need to increase the repairs and renewals by 7 million. Maybe it can come out of the turnstone reserve, but we think we're going to need that for losses on turnstone. So I hope that you ask the administration to come up with a detailed list of what's going on in the reserves. You're only looking at what's going on in the P&L account or the income statement. You need to see what's going on in the reserves. You need to ask about that. And you need to ask which reserves they're going to use. And if it is that they're going to cut their spending, you need to ask them what they're going to cut and how they're going to go about it. And it's not good enough just to say, we've always done it in the past, we'll do it again. They were just riding in the last few years on those Section 31 payments coming from the government. If I've got any more time, have I got time to talk about the HRA?
30 seconds more, please, William. I'm giving you 30 seconds extra.
I can't talk about the HRA except to say that I think there's serious concerns in my mind about the HRA, about that forecast. I don't believe the interest calculation, I don't believe the depreciation calculation. There's something going on there, and I'm sure it's been done loyally and scrupulously, but while we haven't got an external audit, I think the scrutiny panel ought to be asking for an audit around those major repairs, the depreciation, the way the interest comes through. It's not good enough to be implying an interest rate of 2.7%.
Councillor Something, so I better stop you there because I've been generous already, if you don't mind. So obviously you've been courteous to distribute a set of numbers here in which you've annotated and you just referenced an implied interest rate of 2.7% and a capex depreciation over 159 years. Even I can understand that if those figures are correct, that you're right to be putting them in front of us here, if they are. Even I can understand that as someone who's not trained like you are as an accountant. But anyway, thank you for that contribution. I will look to the portfolio holder. I imagine Deputy Section 151 Officer might wish to jump in as well about your specific points, but I will look to the portfolio holder first of all, the Chancellor of Colchester.
Please don't say it again, Darius. I am just Councillor Mark Corey, Resources Portfolio Holder. I would like to address some of it, but I will let the Independent Finance Officer do it because I think some points I'll get carried away with. But one thing I would say is the Section 151 officer did go back and talk about the 10 years, and I was there. 2015 was when I first started this role. So we have had those deficits forecasted, and we have worked on them each time and delivered on them. And what I'd say, it was even more difficult back then because we had a revenue support grant, £13 million at its peak in our budget, directly from government. And that went down to zero. Now there's swings and roundabouts as to what we get now, but it's nothing like what that was. So we had to reduce budgets to an even greater extent, chunks of 3, 4, 5 million at times. So we have done it, and we will continue to work legally within the framework. But I will go to Chris because I know there's a number of elements he wanted to address there, including the Section 31 payments in the reserves. There's a lot there that needs to be corrected.
And then William, you will have a chance to come back. Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I suppose we need to start with the reserves position. I mean, you're suggesting that the council has been, implying that the council has been living beyond its means, basically, in terms of running down the reserves. I think it's fair to say over the last 3-4 years. I mean, first of all, the reserve did materially decline, but you'll be aware that in terms of rounding as near as damn it, they stabilised last year. It's not true that they actually fell by £1 million. So just to get that bit straight, first of all, and thank you for acknowledging the Section 31 receipts, but that's only part of the story. So back in August, I went back to examine the council's balance sheet going back 10 years. So I thought that was a sort of decent cut-off point, if you like. And over that period, 10 years ago, the council had something like 16-17 million in reserves, and typically it oscillated from one year to the next, but this is general fund reserves, by the way, so it oscillated from one year to the next around about the £20 million mark until COVID came along in 2021. And as Councillor Sunnock says, we received significant Section 31 grants as part of the business rates arrangements there, which meant that the council was able to grant in accordance with the national sort of emergency schemes, if you like, around rate reliefs. It was able to grant those rate reliefs and forego significant income. That's what it was designed to do. The arrangements were such as the pandemic finished, they reined back the business rates relief, so the council's still experienced significant losses on its collection fund, which lasted, in Colchester's case, it varied from one council to another, but in Colchester's case, it only lasted for 2 years. So for 21-22 and 22-23, the council had huge losses in its collection fund, for which it had to fund those collection fund losses because it was missing business rates, in inverted commas. And the council had a reserve, which was specifically, it had funds that the government specifically put there for that purpose, to address those deficits. That was the same for all billing authorities across the country. And that's what the council duly did, because the council performed so well in terms of business rates that it generated. It was able to eliminate that deficit by the end of 22-23. And that explains why no contribution was required in 23-24, which meant that the reserves themselves stabilised in 23-24 at 30 million. So that 30 million then is about 50% higher than the council had previously operated in the period 2015 through to 2020. So it's completely incorrect to suggest that the council is sort of strapped for reserves. It's incorrect to suggest that it's been living on beyond its means over the last sort of 3 years in terms of running down the reserves for that purpose. I can understand why that erroneous interpretation has been taken, but it is, I'm afraid, erroneous. Going forwards, the deficits, as highlighted by Councillor Sunnock, are very real, and that bit I acknowledge, and I'm sure the administration acknowledges that, but the backward-looking piece, the context, if you like, is incorrect. Turning to the housing revenue account, I don't want to go into detail here because it's highly complex, and I'd only embarrass myself without a specialist alongside me to go into the detail. But the housing revenue account, as you'll possibly be aware, is subject to some pretty complex, I won't say unusual, that's probably not the right word to use in an accounting context, but there are some very, how can I put it, there are some very specific accounting arrangements in the housing revenue account that are prescribed as part of the legislation and are enshrined in the code of practice, the accounting code of practice. And those, those accounting practices are not quite as you would normally see in the private sector, as I'm sure Councillor Sonics would acknowledge that, and indeed he is acknowledging that. But that includes component accounting, so accounting, which is part of it, the replacement of bathrooms and kitchens and stuff like that. And once you put the numbers presented through there, what it does create is the impression that the council is stretching its depreciation over a number of years. I think 159 has been used, which is completely unrealistic. That's not happening. What is happening is a totally different accounting process that's heavily prescribed. It's one that the council has legally had to follow since 2012, and it's also been through numerous audits up until, including, I think, whatever the last one was, that we got a thorough audit signed off, and nothing has changed since. So I think people need to understand that context. So there's other things that I could go on about, but I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Do you want to just tackle the point that Councillor Sonics made about the implied interest rate at 2.7%? Because, I mean, my mortgage is up for renewal shortly, and I'll take that, but I don't think I'll get that.
Okay, sorry, I do apologise. Yes, I mean, first of all, I'd need to see your calculation, because that isn't true, that isn't what we've got in there, so I'd need to see where you've come from with that particular interest rate. I think the thing to say is that it is higher, the interest rate assumption in there, but honestly I've forgotten what it is, to be honest. But the housing revenue account, you know, the actual borrowing rate is heavily discounted at the moment. For example, 0.6 of 1% that the council gets on a discount. That the government's given through the PWLB to encourage housing investment is one example, but also those interest rates, and I know this is the bit that Councillor Sonics disagrees with, is what we expect to borrow. You know, the borrowing rates that are projected in year 5 as opposed to what they currently are today. Now, there is, amongst economists, there is no sort of clear agreement on precisely what interest rates will be in 5 years' time. But what I would say is that there is a consensus, a very strong consensus, that interest rates will fall in the medium term, and that's what's reflected in the forecast. So,
Okay.
Sense, but it's higher than 2.7%, just to reassure you.
I'd hope so. But we're going to come back to William shortly, if this is pertinent. Councillor Rowe.
Chair, thank you. Apologies. Just on that point, you noted with regards to the rate that we borrow. So I've had sort of other conversations with other councillors and with Councillor Corrie in the past. And there is some assumption that we borrow at a discounted rate below the current spot rate. Can you clarify exactly what rate we borrow at the moment? Are we borrowing at spot market rate? Are we borrowing at, I don't know, where do we get our funds from, and how exactly are they calculated? And look, I get that the high level overview, right? I think you pointed out 0.6%. So is there a discount on the spot rate, or how does that work? Thank you.
There's no short answer to that, I'm afraid. It's very complicated, but there are discounts that the council receives in its general fund, in its housing revenue account. It gets a 0.2 certainty rate in its general fund. It's known as a 0.6 discount in its HRA, but we don't assume that, by the way. So those figures, it's just reflecting reality, but it's not assumed in the budget. We're cautious. I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned is what we assume in terms of our interest receivable. So we assume 0.5% less, so we get a surplus in terms of what we invest. So it's about being prudent about your income as well, which I admit it doesn't fully offset it because we're a net borrower, but it does mitigate.
You have improving over the years, like your last year's forecast, improving this year. Do you want to mention it?
Yeah, as Councillor Corey rightly says, that you know, previous forecasts for our budgets are here. This is the most underspent, I emphasise, budget that the council has. So interest payable tends to be underspent. I wasn't around when the interest rates leapt up about 3 years go here, but I know I've only got it wrong once in my career, and that was when the interest rates went from about 0.25 of 1% up to about 4 point something percent in the space of a few months, but that was before I worked at Colchester.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Willits, you wanted to have a quick intervention before I come back to Councillor Sunnucks.
No, Chairman, we're in an area where I'm totally lost on housing revenue account calculations. And I just wondered whether it was possible, as one of the action points out of this meeting, we could have a sort of tutorial paper. You know, it's not something very elaborate, just explaining how it is that we end up with an apparent interest rate of 2.7 when that is not the case because of the calculations. If there's an easy person's guide to how these calculations are done, I think it would be useful for the scrutiny panel to see it. If, on the other hand, you say it is impossible to write an easy person's guide, then I think we probably understand.
On the depreciation point, it will be a challenge, but I can look at the interest rate thing. Yeah. I'll look at that because I'd like to know where you got your numbers from on that point. So, yeah.
Grateful. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Sunnucks.
Yes, I can give good answers to Councillor Rowe's question. And the big thing we've forgotten is that the standard public works load board rate is the gilt plus 1%. Okay? Plus 1%, okay? The gilt at the moment is 4.6%. Now you get a discount, something, and I've forgotten the name of it, discount of 0.2% for the general fund, a certainty rate I think it's called, and you get an even bigger discount for the HRA. So effectively, if you want to look at your rate, whatever duration you borrow at, and I can see there's one councillor around the table nodding from his experience, whatever rate we borrow at, it's gilt plus 0.4% for the HRA and 0.8% for the general fund. So we should be using 5% for the HRA and 5.4%. We're not, because the officers have received advice that they should have a lower rate. They've been told they should use 4%. So that's what they've used. And they can claim that it's, it's a government recommendation. But I do think there's a problem in this HRA, and it's a really serious problem because we're not in any 1 year allowed to go into deficit in the HRA. We're not allowed to set a deficit budget. And if this gets scrutinised, and it might well get scrutinised as we go through LGR, if it gets scrutinised and it's found we've gone into deficit, we are in some trouble. So I think we should take the HRA, we should ask for an external audit or something of the HRA. I've asked BDO about it, and they've refused to give any assurance. And I've asked KPMG about it, and they've refused to give any assurance. The track record of cost cutting, in the last few years anyway, I haven't been back 10 years, but in the last few years, the last 5 years, staff numbers have increased. They might have decreased during this year. Okay, I acknowledge that, but I haven't got proper figures for it. But if you look from 2019 to 2024, they've increased. If you take Colchester and CBH together, they've increased, and they just have. And there's been no big moves of them taking in any PP or the museums or anything. So I don't really feel there's much credibility. We're asked to believe this sort of thing. Oh, we've done it in the past, so we'll do it again. It's sort of, it's a scrutiny panel. Something will turn up. Philosophy. I feel you need to scrutinise it.
Thank you. I was generous there. Thank you. Okay, I saw Chris wishing to come back, and I heard the gilt rate 4.6 plus.
No, sorry, the moment has passed, Chair. I think it was just around to emphasise the point that we have Link as our Treasury Management advisors that advises on forecasts, importantly forecasts in the context of the medium-term financial forecast. And as I say, we have different Treasury Management advisors at Epping. Sorry, they say exactly the same thing.
Okay, we will Okay, I'll take the leader first, but I just want to pick up on. I'm not going to bring you back in, Councillor Sykes. It's not what I'm allowed to do tonight. But you have been very specific about advice this authority has been given, and I understand that potentially, I'll be very careful with words because I'm not across the detail like you are, but advice was given to this authority, which has resulted in a bill to HMRC, which we're now not very happy about.
My question is whether the advice was, whether we've taken the right figures from the advice, because whether we've added the margin in. I suspect we haven't.
Okay, I'm going to have the leader.
Oh, look, on the HMRC and this tax liability, nobody's comfortable with the result, so that's shared ground and that's being reviewed. So that's something that will come back to committee again. So if we stay on the budget piece, my understanding of and we should be careful about how we talk about professional colleagues, should we not? But we are talking about getting external advice that is cross-checked elsewhere, that's drawn upon a pool of information and experts. And experts get it wrong, don't they? But the best advice available, that's the important thing. So we apply our Section 151 officer and his deputy and the team apply their judgment, but they apply it alive to the best advice they can get. That's a really important assurance for the committee. There's two other things briefly, if I may, before I hand back to, I won't call him Chancellor to get upset again. The one is we do have a savings record, and the Deputy Section 151 illustrated that by talking about where we were if you look at a 10-year period and how reserves are. It's the best simple demonstration of where they were, what they are now. It does show that we are in the round, in the year-on-year process in which we have to work. That's our only legal binding obligation, balance the books. We do it, and in a way which increases the reserves. We have savings in the past. We've talked about them, but I just glanced at, asked for an update and fit for the future. So confidence in the future really matters, accepting that the primary focus is on the coming year. We have a Fit for the Future programme, which looks for the better part of £4 million savings. And when I've looked at it, the latest numbers, which may be different to the one Chris has got, a large part of that is in the process of being delivered and the rest is scheduled. Now, there will be risks and issues. It'd be extraordinary if everything we want to have happen happens. But the point to take, I recommend to the committee, is this rolling commitment to year on year getting things sorted. Thank you.
Okay, I will take Councillor Rowe, but then I think I need to give the floor back to Councillor Corey to actually introduce the budget, because we're getting a bit granular at the moment before we've given you the chance to have the floor. But Councillor Rowe,
I appreciate it, Chair. Thank you very much. I will try to keep it brief, but this point on the interest rate does concern me, because my question was initially around the spot rate and around how much we borrowed at. I was given one version by the administration, a slightly different version by Councillor Sunnox, which then seemed to be agreed with by the administration. I think there is some concern and there is some difference here around what rate we're borrowing at, and if there are differences in the calculations, I do think we need to take that. We do need to. I understand that it's only small percentage points that we're talking about, but when we're talking about a capital budget of 265 odd million, those small percentage points can very quickly run into large sums of money. And I do think we need to be careful about what we're talking about. And if we're scrutinising this and recommending this and saying, yes, we recommend this to Cabinet at some point, you know, it's our job to scrutinise this. We need to understand the numbers, and we need to make sure that those numbers are fully understood by everybody on this committee. And obviously everybody, you know, sort of across the council as well. So I do think it would be really good for us to get into the detail and really find that out before we sort of go any further on this. I really think that's something that has to be, we have to understand, and we have to get in writing exactly what the points are. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just make the point about materiality here? So if we look at, for example, if we look at the general fund, and this is the budget for the year ahead, if we look at the capital programme in 25-26, there's about, I haven't got the exact figure, but it's 21 point something million in there as the borrowing assumption. So if the council delivered all of that capital programme and borrowed all of that 21 odd million, okay, there is an assumption in there. We don't go out there and borrow it on April the 1st. It's expenditure that accrues throughout the year. So the council would borrow, you know, the way we work it would be, we'd estimate that that borrowing would take place right in the middle of the year. So therefore, that's the impact of borrowing 10 and a bit million in effect, okay? So if we pretended that we were 1% under in terms of our projections, the consequences of that, the budget overspend, would be just over £100,000 or something like that. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about in the context of a budget of, we're talking of, you know, a net expenditure budget, and that's on the gross expenditure side of it. I can't remember embarrassingly, I can't remember the figure, but we're talking about, you know, 100 million in terms of the gross figure or something like of that sort of order. I think it is that figure. It's a very high figure. Sorry, I've got Epping's figures going around in my head at the same time. I know Epping's is 70 something, Colchester's a bit bigger. So we're talking on the gross expenditure side. So that's the context we're talking about. I also said that we are more prudent on our assumptions around interest receivable. So at the same time, we'd be getting a surplus because our interest rate is wrong. We would be getting a surplus on interest receivable. So that further reduces the impact. So I think there's a question of materiality here, and we're in danger of focusing on very small sums of money instead of looking at the budget in the round. There's lots of assumptions in there with far greater figures that actually mean something in the near future. I take the point about the long-term prospects for the HRA. When that kind of thing does matter, I accept that, and that forms part of the HRA review. So that's all I'll say, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Corey, building on that if you wish, and then please take us through the budget.
Yeah, I'll just work backwards. So the HRA in particular is under review because of increased costs over time. We do feel that we will need to deliver it in a different way, and it will need to come down. So that's something that we are working on, and we've taken some indications from the review that we've carried out. But what I would say back to the numbers as well, there would be no good reason that we'd be underestimating the rates at which we can borrow, because that would not help in the future. So our forecast from last year, which Councillor Sunnox did question as well, have come in that once again we have a surplus because we were prudent in the numbers, and over the year that has worked out. So what Chris has also just said about materiality comes into focus, but essentially we are not far out on the numbers because we are still delivering the HRA programme at a surplus this year, having looked at it last year, had a disagreement last year, but still got to the right place this year because we are prudent about it, and we are not saying, oh, we're borrowing at 2.7%, really low, much lower than the actual rate. That's not the case. So we do need to understand where Councillor Sunnox is getting that confusion or those figures from, because we are delivering. So if it forecasted the way that Councillor Sunnox said last year, we wouldn't have delivered the surplus that we did this year. So we are doing something right, but the HRA is under review because we also see, as Councillor Sunnox says, that going forward it's a lot of borrowing to supplement our housing programme. So we need to be more prudent with that, and we will be. Because of the cost of borrowing at the moment is high. And also because of the different factors that restrict us in housing policy. So we need to be really careful. We are not able to deliver as viable projects as we could 10 years ago when the interest rates were much lower. So we understand that, and we are addressing that. If we come back to the wider budget as a whole, of course, we are carrying out Fit for the Future programme to reduce our overall revenue spend, because we've talked about deficits in the future that we need to address. So they have been implied, but we need to go further in terms of, we've talked about headcount this evening. We still need to go further in terms of our revenue budget. That's what I'm telling this committee today. So in our budget, we do see reductions in certain services through Fit for the Future, We also see increases in fees, and we also see the council tax rate to 2.99%. So there is a number of ways in which we balance the budget, and we are balancing it this year with a tiny contribution to reserves. And we are looking forward to next year and how we can also start closing those gaps as well. But there are positives, and I'm just going to do the headlines and then pass to Chris for the detail. And I can come back on any other more political questions. We have taken the decisions on revenue because we don't want to be using reserves completely to supplement. We want to use reserves in a way that invests in our communities and invests in capital projects that don't have revenue cost. So I have outlined some of those in the budget report, looking at community assets and community buildings, looking at the bus terminal, whatever you want to call it, but that is working with Essex County Council, Team Colchester, something the leader has really worked closely on. We do have a better relationship with Essex. Even under my days of leadership, you've improved it, David. You've done better at working with Essex, so well done. And the public do really care about getting a better public transport solution in Colchester. Around the Osborne Street sort of small terminal that we have at the moment, improving upon that. And also looking at things like play parks, how we can spend more on things that are at the heart of our communities to support our residents and our families, because we know those areas of the budget are stretched. So doing what we can with the prudent reserves that we have, looking forward to where we need to continue to reduce the revenue budget, but continue to bring in income in different ways, continue to hope that the government is generous in certain areas, such as the extended producer pays scheme, and also bank on the strong performance of businesses and business rates in our area. So there's a number of factors that this budget addresses, and it starts to look towards next year to address the factors there as well. I'll move over to Chris to continue to extol the virtues of the technical decency of this budget and how we've got to a balanced budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. A lot of what I'm going to cover is sort of been covered already, so I'll try to avoid that and refer to it, but apologies now if I repeat the odd detail along the way. But so the general fund budget then, which general fund revenue budget, should I say, draft general fund revenue budget proposals appear in Appendix A of the report. Now, it's the balance. The budget is now, as has already been said, is now fully balanced. We had an original deficit of 1.893 million, which was back in September that we reported. Not as big as the 3.1 that we're projecting for 26-27, but nevertheless over halfway there. So as an example, and that has been now addressed without the need to draw on any reserves. There was an expectation that we probably would have to draw on reserves, but that didn't happen. I'm pleased to report we don't have to do that now. And draft net expenditure for 25-26 is now settled at 29.974 million, which is presented in paragraph 2.1 of Appendix A. And this includes the updated funding position following the release of the provisional local government finance settlement for 25-26. I emphasise provisional. Government's got a track record of issuing a final settlement with slightly different numbers at the margins that usually immaterial, but there is that small caveat there, but they tend to be more positive than negative, to be fair. Also, as has already been touched upon, national insurance remains a risk. We had originally assumed 100% compensation from the government, but the word on the street, if you like, is that we won't get 100%, could get significantly less, and on that basis we've reduced that assumption down to 50% on the basis of updated intelligence. So we still don't know what it's going to be, but it's got to be pretty bad luck to be below 50%. So, as set out in paragraphs 2.7 and 2.8 of Appendix A, the budget also contains assumed savings of 175,000 from Fit for the Future. So just to avoid any confusion, the numbers reflected already contain Fit for the Future. So any additional savings that are required in the future, etc., are required on top of the current Fit for the Future programme. Just to emphasise that point, and as Councillor Corey says, the current proposal is a 2.99% increase in the council tax, which is in line with it's the maximum allowed within the government's referendum limit, and obviously members have the option to vary that. So that's the general fund revenue position. The HRA revenue budget proposals are set out on Appendix B. Not a great deal to say there, very little difference compared to the position back in November, although the net operating income has declined. It's now down to 794,000, and the reasons for that are explained in the report. But I think the thing to emphasise here, partly because it's topical, is the biggest item, I believe, was national insurance. So the management fee that the council pays to Colchester Borough Homes has had to be increased to reflect their increased costs as a result of the additional national insurance contributions that are coming down the line. So there's a live example of where we've taken account of the indirect costs of national insurance contributions. Moving on to the capital programme on Appendix C, a lot of this has already been covered, but as Councillor Sunnock says, 78.9 million over 5 years, including 40.4 million in 25-26. I think the thing to flag here is that there's a noticeable change visually compared to the November position, and that's because there's been a reprofiling of, I must emphasise, pre-approved schemes, so schemes that were slipping in 24-25 have been moved forward in significant numbers into 25-26. In terms of the financial impact and capital financing costs, it has very little impact, and the reason for that is because they are primarily grant-funded schemes. So we're talking about Town Deal, we're talking about LUF projects, etc., which are 100% externally funded, which means that because we don't have to borrow, we don't have to provide for MRP either, so therefore it has no impact. There's some tiny impacts at the margins around grants that were received in advance, which boosts our interest receivable, but it's quite small, so there's no great difference other than the expenditure line moves from one year to the next. So in terms of the HRA capital programme, again already mentioned, but 157.6 million over 5 years, including 25.7 million in 25-26, and that includes 99.1 million for capital investment in housing stock. That's unchanged compared to the November position, and as ever, I'd ask you to note the HRA review that's in progress that could probably will, as Councillor Corey has said, potentially lead to some significant changes in the programme, especially in the later years. And to finish off with the updated medium-term financial forecast in Appendix E, that's summarised in paragraph 3.4 in Appendix E. The longer-term profile in that forecast is the profile of it is like that presented in the November iteration. It's the same sort of shaped graph, if you like. However, the forecast deficit for 26-27 was 2.7 million in November, but has now risen to 3.1 million, and there's a range of reasons for that, which are explained in the report, but in paragraph 3.5 of the report, although net expenditure has eased slightly, this has been outweighed by a significant reduction in the underlying funding assumptions, which are embedded in the report, which leads to a slightly larger deficit in 26-27, which then has the impact of rolling forward, if you like, through the years to end up with a larger structural deficit in year 5, which we've already talked about. And that's got nothing more to add, Chair.
Thank you very much for walking us through that. I'll just kick off with a question before I turn to members, and that was, I made a note here, I heard Councillor Sunnock suggest that he was concerned that around the capital financing, that the SIPFA code might be in breach. I don't know if we need to just get clarity on what you mean by that, but I don't understand what that means because I don't understand what the code is. So perhaps, colleagues, if you are able to give us an insight, and if needs to be, Councillor Sunnock, so I'll ask you for clarification.
I mean, I'm not sure what the specific point is, but the principles of the Prudential Code are that capital investment should be prudent, affordable and sustainable is the phrase, and that's probably the bit where we're kind of agreeing to disagree. In your view,
they are, but Councillor Sunnock is
absolutely,
suggesting they're not.
The Section 25 report that Andrew Small will write in effect will confirm that, but those capital financing costs are included in the figures, and there is a there is a deficit there that is clearly identified and it's clearly acknowledged by everyone, including the administration, of course. That's something that needs to be addressed going forward.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, now is our time. Councillor Rowe, you had your hand up first.
Thank you very much, Chair. Apologies to keep reverting back to the interest rate, but in order to clear this up, would it be possible for us to be able to see the advice that we got from Link with regards to that? I think that would be probably the easiest way for us to be able to resolve this. Obviously, you can't get it now, but...
Well, no, I mean, I can speak for you. This panel can ask to see that advice. It can.
Okay, fair enough.
It's just a case of...
Well, maybe that's a recommendation.
The timing of it, because obviously you've got Cabinet tomorrow night. We've got full council later on. But yeah, it's a reasonable request. And I do think, and I'm sorry, I know colleagues won't like me saying it, but in the context of having to pay HMRC, a tax bill of 400 grand for a loss-making entity, I mean, I derive part of my income by being self-employed, and if I have a good year, I go and buy some equipment to reduce that tax bill.
Chair,
That's what you do.
When you say loss-making entity, the reason we've had to pay it is not...
Yeah, but it's a mistake in the advice.
No, I understand that, but just...
We're criticising you, but we are questioning the
just got to think about the language on that. Okay. But I understand this, and we can, quite essentially. I'll let Chris come back, but I just want to be clear on that.
I think, unless anyone disagrees, I think the request from Councillor Rowe for this forum to see that advice is reasonable.
To be helpful, Chair. Obviously the role of the Treasury Management Strategy, which covers things like interest rates, etc., comes within the remit of the Governance and Audit Committee. It actually has a meeting on the 25th, the night before full council, and I will be preparing the report. I'm preparing the reports at the moment in readiness for that meeting, and that will include an update around things like interest rates, and it will go into some detail. As a suggestion, I could perhaps circulate that report in some shape or form, picking up on the interest point ahead of the full council for the budget. Would that help?
That would help, but I still feel that, because I still feel that we need to see that as part of this committee, and we need to understand it before we go any further.
Well, it's not going to happen tonight.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, I feel like that's integral. For us to understand the full impact, it is integral that we see that advice and we understand it. As you say, especially given the context of what we know about previous advice that's been given and issues that have arisen from it.
Councillor, Why am I forgetting your name, Deputy Chairman? I've had enough coffee.
I just want to check
Too many
Chairman, the way I can't find it in my book now. The way it was written, that advice had been obtained from Link, made it sound as though this wasn't normal Treasury management. This was a specific request to Link to look at aspects of the HRA. Is that a correct assumption on my part, or is this just Link gives us some general hints on interest rates, and we've just picked this one out of their report rather than commissioning them to give a report on this specific issue that's mentioned in the text?
We have retained Treasury Management advisors, okay, who keep us up to date and provide advice around things like counterparty limits and stuff like that. You know, whether whether it's safe to invest, if you like, for want of a better phrase, with other counterparties. They also provide updates on interest rates and forecasts and that sort of thing. So it's routine in this particular context. If we talk about, you know, the KL accounting treatment, that was a bespoke piece of work. That was one-off. That was different. This is routine Treasury management advice that we receive, and any day now they are about to release an updated interest rate forecast. So periodically they update them.
Chair, if you don't mind me asking very quickly, just on that point, because of the fact that it's been resubmitted, when was we last provided the interest? When did Link last provide the advice to us?
November. They updated it following the, I think it was the American elections was November, wasn't it? So immediately after that they updated the forecast, and they have promised to do so again after the inauguration of President Trump. I was going to call him Councillor Trump.
Chancellor Trump.
So that updated forecast is imminent.
Okay. Councillor Rowe, you've had quite a lot of airtime. Other members further down the table, do you have any questions? No. Okay. I saw Councillor Willits. What's your name?
Oh, that's really good of you, Chairman. I just got one or two sort of odd random questions which arise, having sort of read through the report several times. The first one was on page 21, premises repairs. This year we have 0.23 million for responsive repairs and 0.23 million cyclical repairs, giving about £500,000. But we've been told that Patricia Berry has reported that we should be spending £7 million a year across the estate. And if one looks at the way premises costs are trending, the 13.7 is now a peak, and in future years it will actually be falling at a time when it's being suggested we should be spending significantly more on properly servicing and maintaining the CCC estate. So I just wondered whether, what happens to this recommendation that the 7 million should be spent on the estate when it doesn't seem to have been incorporated at all into this year's budget. It was on page 21.
Sorry, there's a number of different pages, Dennis. Could you which are you looking at, the scrutiny paper or the budget paper?
Oh, I look at the cabinet papers.
And the cabinet paper, okay. Yeah. I'm actually.
That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, no, I'm on that one. So sorry, which is it? The page number at the bottom or the page number of the report? So, are you saying? Sorry, because the reason I ask is because there's a number of areas where. Let me address it in the round. What Patricia has done in terms of the corporate landlord work is identify that we do have a number of assets that will need repair. In the report, you will see two line items basically. One is about sort of the general repairs, which is ongoing repairs, and another is about repairing the assets. And we've also put in a third area where you will see specifics about, say, the weir, for example. So there are elements where we are addressing it, but we still need to go and do more based on Patricia's work. So if I can find the one you're talking about.
Actually, it's page 29, sorry.
Okay.
On the expenditure dialogue to Appendix A, almost the bottom of the page, there's a dialogue on premises costs.
Oh, yeah.
I expected to see some reference to the recommendation. Council estate.
Sorry, do you mind just repeating a couple of sentences?
Page 29, premises total cost 13.765 in this budget for expenditure. I'd expected that we would have seen an uplift in that to reflect that the estate is in not good condition. As has been mentioned, things are falling apart, roofs are falling in and so on, and that as a council we should be spending more on maintaining the estate now so that future costs are less. But it appears that there's nothing there. Is that because the 7 million has yet to be approved and incorporated in the budget, or it's somewhere else that I haven't yet found?
Two parts. As I tried to explain it a few minutes ago, and pretty much will say the same. So that premises budget is more about the ongoing maintenance repairs of sort of our corporate buildings on more operational side of things. Whereas we have got line items that address some of the specific assets, such as the weir, that we need to put money into. But we also have, as an administration, we've got to set out priorities, and we will use some of the reserves for it, for some of the work that Patricia has been unveiling. So the answer is that specific budget is not for some of that extra work that we've found with our assets. That is more for continuing to look at our premises, understanding that we need to invest in them more, otherwise we will end up with specific one-off issues such as the weir or the town hall. So in a longer term impact, that increase in the premises cost is about looking after our buildings. But there are separate line items, Appendix C, David has found, for example, pointing towards our asset management strategy and commitment to increase 1 million. And there is, I'm pretty sure, there is another line item somewhere that deals with the weir, for example, and King Edward Quay. So particular capital elements for immediate asset repair. And David has found it, thank you, in Appendix C, the asset management strategy increasing £1 million each year in that. So we'll start getting towards what Patricia has outlined, but there still is political decisions to be made by us as administration, but all of us in terms of as much as we involve you on the estates members group and what have you, about some of the key significant asset costs that we have coming down the road. And that is also where we need to close revenue costs by actually looking at disposal and getting some of these liabilities off of our books, to be blunt.
Thank you. Okay. So it's all going to be capital, none of it will be revenue. The 7 million is going to be a capital.
So in the asset management strategy, that is revenue contributions, but we will have to look at assets as certain assets in a one-off way that would be capital correct.
Yeah, okay. My next question was on page 31, the financing costs, where it says a substantial reduction in the financing costs due to the MRPs being reprofiled. When one looks at the table on page 52 showing exactly what it is, it would appear that most of the capital programme for next year is not grant funded. It's the following year where we pick up the grants for the levelling up and the city projects. And the schemes which are being looked at in the forthcoming year are in the main going to hit our, in terms of interest rates and minimum revenue position, unless I misunderstand what is there. The schemes are fleet replacement, wheelie bins, car parks, and the pumping station, none of which seem particularly well funded by grant, unless I misunderstand the position. So the profiling exercise should not reduce the minimum revenue payments for the year 2025-26, which is the one we're looking at. They've all slipped into the following year. We have to meet the full borrowing costs for those schemes.
You start.
Sorry, if you look at, I'm sorry, I've got a different set of page numbers to you, so I'm struggling myself. So if you look at Annex C1 of Appendix C, that summarises the capital programme, and you'll see that there's 6.2 million in terms of town deal schemes that are now profiled for 25-26. So those are grant-funded schemes that have gone across there. You'll also see levelling up funds of a further 11.2 million that are in 25-26 that have been moved forward, primarily moved forward, should I say, from the previous year. The only outlier, if you like, is Northern Gateway and the CNG scheme, which the enabling works there, which was already reprofiled in the November report, so there's been no difference between the two there, and that's an important one to note because that one the council is actually borrowing for. So the grant schemes the council doesn't have to provide MRP for, they're all fully funded, doesn't have to borrow for. And the other thing to say about MRP is that actually you have to pay, the way in which the council's policy works, which abides by the rules, might emphasise, is the council incurs a full MRP charge the year following the capital expenditure occurred, rather than a full charge in the year that the capital expenditure is incurred. So if a scheme is, a building is constructed in 6 months in 1 year, no MRP charge, full MRP charge the second year. So when you mess around with borrowed schemes, then it then can push back MRP charges. And just to possibly contradict myself slightly, the CNG enabling works, because that's infrastructure, we do borrow for that, yes, but it's because it's infrastructure, the actual payments are spread over 50 years, so it doesn't show up much. The provision, the MRP provision is all there, but it doesn't make much of a difference annually because it's infrastructure.
And just at the end of that paragraph, it says in brackets that CNG, which is Colchester Northern Gateway, infrastructure and ICT and fleet, because the Colchester Northern Gateway project at 7.7 something million is quite significant. That's where, by reprofiling that later on, we could go into the detail about that another time, then that will reduce our carrying of cost.
Next question was on the matter of interest payments and the interest rates, which we've already discussed. Question is, how safe, given that you have concerns about the HRA, how safe is it to incorporate that in the budget as it stands, with no qualification about the work that needs doing and the changes that may occur to the HRA? Because it seems as though there could be dramatic changes.
So we have taken on board some small changes and have reduced the overall borrowing projection. But yeah, Chris, if you want to give a financial view on that, that would help.
I think you're looking at the budget for the year ahead. There's no known risk or anything for the, you know, no issues with the budget as such, 25-26 budget. The HRA review could potentially impact the latter years of the medium-term financial forecast. It's not a budget issue for 25-26, or probably 26-27 either, but you know, it could impact from sort of years 3, 4, 5. So.
Members, if you want to interject, just catch my eye, but otherwise I can see that Councillor Willis has another couple of questions.
Yeah, on fees and charges on page 32, we're told that the garden waste income is to be reduced by 0.389 in the estimates, million in the estimates. Is this a reflection of the actual levels? Is there less demand, or is it that people are not paying for the service? It was a bit difficult to understand why on a service which we've been told is truly buoyant and is in great demand and is meeting all its targets, that we're actually reducing our estimate of income by almost 400,000.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, where's sorry, I wasn't around at the time, but I do believe it's to do with the original accounting assumptions around subscription fees. I don't know exactly how it works, but there's a subscription fee, then there's an annual charge, which in accounting terms you can only credit the subscription fee once, and then you get the annual charge, which comes in year after year, and there was some kind of correction to the original accounting assumption back in the day, so that's what it is.
So, just clarifying, this is an accounting issue of where the money falls, rather than a reduction in demand or a failure to collect the income that should be accruing from this service.
This is a reduced income assumption, a permanent reduced income assumption.
Sorry, can you explain why? I don't understand why there's a, yeah, I don't understand that. Sorry, Chris, also, could you, could you also explain the accounting assumption on the two payments, the continued payment versus the subscription payment? I don't quite understand why there's a difference in the books on that.
Yeah, I don't know if a colleague could help me out on this. I'm not too familiar with how the scheme works, but in accounting terms, my understanding is that there's two elements to it. You sign up, like the membership fee, and then we've had that in the past, so it's not ongoing income. The rest of it is like an annual.
Yeah, but it's an annual.
So it's along those lines, but it recognises a permanent reduction in income. So
Can I suggest that what we do is give the facts to the committee after the event? I want to say that our understanding is the service is running this well, but I think this is a year-on-year piece, but we should inform you after the event. It's not going to materially affect the judgment here, but it's a very fair question, and we'd be happy to give some clarification.
Fit for Future programme, I understand that the 4.77 million is fully integrated into the MTTF, but a recent report said that there was a shortfall of 1.799 million, which had to be sort of reprogrammed or sort of caught up. How is this being done? It isn't obvious from the way the information is presented to us how Fit for Future shortfall is being incorporated. I mean, is it just being rolled into next year's deficit, or is other action being taken to ensure that the shortfall is made up in future years? Because it was one of the planks of getting the budget back on track. And to see that there is a shortfall of 1.799 million, which is unexplained, just causes a bit of concern, and I wonder whether it's possible to just give a hint as to how that is being dealt with, either in this year or in the forthcoming year's account, or in future years' account.
Thank you, Dennis. Chris and I were talking, we didn't hear the first point as to which part of the report you were referring to, but the general answer, because I can still give you a general answer, is that the Fit for the Future programme was originally seen as a sort of 3-year programme. It's going to have to go beyond that. But in some cases, we've been able to bring forward savings, but sadly, in a number of cases, they have been pushed back. Sometimes where we are pushing them back, we understand that there is a further implication, an accumulative implication of that. So we've asked in some cases to go further with the saving if it has not been met within year. Could you just refer back to where you were looking again, please?
I think it was on page 39.
Whilst we're waiting, can I just reaffirm the principle, which is we are committed to, we will reflect in the budget calculations the latest information we have. The commitment made is a rolling, if necessary, extendable Fit for the Future programme. So where there is a shortfall, and this is owned by the service, heads of service, where there is a shortfall, the obligation, and Richard is here, if we need him to add confirmation, but set mine, there is an obligation to go and pursue that difference. In the round, we have made a commitment, and a significant part of it has been delivered or is in prospect to deliver what we need to do through Fit for the Future. So we'll be back around this. We report on it regularly. We're back around this again, and you should be expecting us to. We expect you to expect us to share what we're doing next. The officers have the obligation to deliver the savings that's required.
Yes, Chairman, it was just a case of accountancy terms. Where is that 1.799 shortfall occurring? Is it already in next year, or is it something which is going to have to be dealt with outside next year's budget? I mean, again, on day one, will you discover that there's immediately there's a 1.799 shortfall on fitness? Fit for Future, which needs to be sort of carried through on overspends for the forthcoming year. Again, if it's difficult to answer it, I'm quite happy to have a briefing note on,
we can
how
do
it's going
that.
to be.
Either now, if you can really find exactly where it is, or we'll come back to you. So as we've made clear, we've got Fit for the Future embedded within this year and coming years. As I explained, we will achieve those numbers or go beyond if we need to, in order to achieve, because we need to achieve those kinds of savings to meet the deficit. So if you can try and explain exactly where you've seen that figure now, if not, we can come back, definitely.
Well, the leader handed it out at one of the budget briefing meetings.
Now teams need to go and be so open, won't it? Of course, we share as we go. So why don't we take look, it's getting late too, it's your call on time, Chair. We'll take that update request, yeah?
Okay, it is 9 o'clock, and I had vowed that I would manage meetings so that we would conclude them at 9 this municipal year. That will not be happening. I would ask permission from members that we can continue with this item until 9:15, and we do have another portfolio holder here who's been courteous and patient, and I think you are. I would like to think that by 9:15 we can get to the end of this item, and then we can then have half an hour scrutiny of the portfolio holder. If that is okay with the room, then we are definitely out of here before 10 o'clock. The doors will be locked at 10, but we will conclude the meeting at 9:45 is my target. Is everyone content with that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If it's a problem and you need to excuse yourself, then perfectly reasonable, but I think we can try and get further progress. Thank you. Okay, it is 9 o'clock. Councillor Willets, do you still have some further areas of questioning and probing?
Yeah, I have a couple of general questions.
Go for it.
On page 42, we have some hints on the Northern Gateway project, which is an obscure financial position. First of all, the guarantee from Canada Life is off balance sheet, so we don't really see anything per se in the budget. The lease back costs are being paid to Canada Life. They're shown in the third party payments. That's netted off against income from the tenants, which is shown in the customer and client receipts. So the project is being spread across various budget headings and is the difference between a couple of big numbers. Then on page 42, we have the Corporate Services Cost Centre 3844, which shows an income from that particular project of £517,000, up from 457 last year. We already know, because scrutiny panel meetings have been cancelled, that there is a problem with the cinema operator, and we know that there is now a 4 million in reserves to cover the costs. And I just worry, Chairman, that we don't really understand just what this is all about because of the way the lease payments and the revenue are in different headings. And I would feel much more confident about the budget if we had a précis of our commercial transactions, which presumably would have to be confidential because it cannot be a published document, but at least a schedule of the commercial transactions so that we can see and try and equate that to the results which are being transferred into the budget, which is an open document. So I have this worry that I don't understand how well the Northern Gateway project is running. We know the cinema problem is difficult, and I think we'd be in a better position to understand the budget if we could have a briefing note on the major commercial projects, not just the Northern Gateway, major commercial projects, and how it is we end up with a relatively small number, which may well be the difference between two large numbers, which, if there was small movement in either, we could see significant shifts in their impact on the budget.
Exactly. So I completely understand. If you look at the budget, the way in which you see income coming in and the money going out, it's hard to bring it together. So I absolutely agree, and I'll promise to ensure we get that, a brief summary of how the finances work. There's something governance and audit have been looking into as well, so it's something that can be shared between the two. In a nutshell, we have in there forecasted income for Northern Gateway because we have to pay Canada Life and we are having to get in rent to cover that cost. We are not going to meet that at this point in time for the reasons you have outlined and understand, so we have the £4 million reserve to help smooth that process. We do have positive movements. I will not go much further than that in terms of where we are in a public meeting, but we are getting to the point where we will be looking at that 4 million, understanding what the call upon that 4 million has been on this year just passing or finishing, and the budgeted year going forward. And then we have to either address whether we need more, or actually if we're going to have much more let units up there with a fully functioning cinema, and actually we'll start seeing the contributions that are predicted in this budget. So we keep those predictions in there for now because we have the most immediate short-term concern there, and we have the reserve there in place. If anything changes in the next year to the negative, then we'll have to start changing those forecasts in a different way. But at the moment, we are hoping to complete on a deal that will then see the turning around of that income to make sure it does meet the Canada Life payment, the income, and the net of that. The net of that is clear. What we are hoping, or were hoping to expect, was £500,000 in our budget. So that's what we hope to see in the future, but we need to deal with the immediate issue first, and we are doing that, as I've explained. So the medium term is where we need to start focusing on. But the first point that you have explained and explained well is that, yeah, you see it coming in and out in different places. So an explanation in confidence would help, and I will ensure we get that.
Could we get that in advance of full council?
Yes.
Thanks. It's reasonable. Okay, I see that Councillor Willett still has
one
more point.
Which is a very quick point.
Go for it.
Chairman. Each year we have the SIP for Resilience Index published. Should we be seeing that index before the scrutiny panel signs off or not signs off, but gives its seal of approval to the budget process? Because looking at last year's, it was a really interesting document, and you think, well, if I'd seen that before the scrutiny panel meeting dealing with the budget, I might well have asked a different set of questions.
The SIP for Resilience Index, I mean, first of all, it's quite, not back, yeah, well, it is backward looking. You know, the most up-to-date figures are the 22, 23 figures that it's published. And some of the numbers in the past, they lack, shall we say, the local interpretation of what's going on. So for example, is a very good example, in fact, of the way in which the council had applied its section 31 receipts, which I talked about earlier. Now that looks to the untrained eye as a run on the reserves in terms of your expenditure exceeding your funding, but clearly that wasn't the case. But if government throws those numbers into a big machine and churns out those graphs, then it appears that way. So there was a degree of local interpretation required, but I'm happy to take that away and look at that because it requires a degree of investigation and interpretation as to exactly what numbers they're using, what they're concluding on the basis of that, and overlaying it with local intelligence. And I think it's no secret that the council has struggled to produce its accounts in recent years in a timely fashion. So there's been some time lags and estimates and stuff that have gone in, which makes it quite challenging. But I'm happy to take that away and share that with you. But it will take a little bit of work. It's not something I can supply in the next couple of days.
Councillor Rowe, and I think we're probably going to get there, and I need to get some firm actions and recommendations shortly.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the beginning of the meeting, the Section 151 officer seemed to be saying that, yes, we have a deficit, but don't worry about it. We always come up with a solution. We always fix it. It seems to me like a pretty cavalier way to run a council. I would like to know, from a political perspective, where are we actually going to get these savings from in the instance that these projections into the next year are correct? So if okay, fine, we're saying we're balancing the budget this year, we're projecting a 3.1 deficit next year. That includes the Fit for the Future as well. So we're already factoring in the fact that we have a Fit for the Future programme, and we are still projecting a budget into the future. So what additional savings costs are we going to cut? What taxes are we going to rise, or where's it going to come from in the deficit? And I mean, with all due respect, Chris, I think that's probably a political question.
Thank you. So I was running through some of these thoughts today, of course, and have been for some time. As I say, I've had experience from 2015 to now where we have delivered on them. And you may have said some of the language you just criticised from the Section 151 officer, but I think he was trying to give comfort that those deficits have been met, and they have. And I've seen it happen. No matter what administration, they have had to be met, and they have. So there's a number of different ways that I could explain now, without too much detail, in ways in which we could see that deficit closed, or at least I can work towards it. So first of all, Fit for the Future can go deeper and further, and we will have to keep looking at how we can make efficiencies, okay? Secondly, the national insurance assumption is a very cautious one. So actually we may soon get from government that actually they've gone for a 75% or an 80%. So actually that will see us having a saving of around 180 to 200,000 pounds. Smallish amount, but a chunk. You then look at also how we've been cautious with the extended producer income. Again, we could use more of that in the base budget, be a bit more sharp with that, less cautious, because we're being very conservative with that in the base budget going forward. Again, increase that by 50%, and you're looking at 500,000 into the base budget. The same again with business rates, being very cautious, being very conservative with that. We could put more of those into the base budget, understanding that actually the business rate review that was going to happen probably will not happen until we are some new authority. So we could bank on that more, rather than using its capital like we're suggesting, because we've been prudent in the past, use it more in the revenue way that we do actually receive it. So those are 4 different ways. We will continue to have to look at fees and charges as well, which we do, but we do delicately, but we have to do that as well. So those are a number of things. Elections, that's been talked about a few times. Actually, we might not have elections, so we might have that saving. Oh God, I've railed against that many times, but I might happily smile at you and nod on that one this time. So there's a number of different ways in which we can do it, as well as using reserves to smooth, but only to smooth, not to completely add to it. I've already given you 6 or 7 ideas, as well as disposals of assets that potentially are liabilities. So we could get capital income, but reduce our revenue liabilities. So Thomas, how about that? That's a lot of good ideas.
That's lovely, and I appreciate the numbers, but I don't think there was any numbers with them, so it would be nice to know how much
I did,
they're going to add up to.
180,000, 500,000, 500,000. I was adding quite a bit in. So immediately, the numbers that I could give you, I could say we could get halfway to the deficit, and that is from the numbers that I can give you. But then we'd have to look further at those different areas that I've outlined. But some of the numbers I've given you tonight, 180,000 to 200 for national insurance, EPR, and business rates. That is halfway to the deficit, 3.1 million.
Okay. We are fast approaching a moment where we need to conclude this item. I will look to the Deputy Chairman in a second just to make sure that the action points that I believe have already been described by the clerk diligently are there, and see if there's any other formal recommendations from members. To summarise where we're at, I'm very grateful that the leader and the portfolio holder for resources have given up their time, not just tonight, but actually in advance. And there's been lots of very open conversations cross-party, which I think is very healthy. I think that the portfolio holder for resources has had a very difficult hand to deal with in regard to the national insurance rise, and it's probably the right approach that you are taking by being small c conservative with that 50%. Maybe you'll get some good news. And of course, we all know that there is a housing crisis, particularly in the southeast, where we're seeing a population explosion. And it was in the national press just last week, just how many people are coming to Colchester as an option from London. Because it's a great place to be, and I don't blame them, but we have a housing crisis. So I just want to pick Councillor Science brain, and I will, because I can. You're bothering me because I am haunted by not taking a 10-year mortgage when I took my last mortgage deal. I'm haunted by that, obviously. Should have anticipated what was going to happen, because rates have been ridiculously low artificially for a long time, right? You know that better than I, but your implied interest rate of 2.7% now, and Chris Hartgrove has done a very good job in explaining that we will get further detail around the HRA and that it's not that figure. But Councillor Sullings, I have to respect the fact that you work in this field, and you're saying that you've done some arithmetic to get that figure, and that figure isn't likely to be a prudent figure. Can you just give us a couple of moments on that now, so that I can get to a point in my head where I have a view on where this is at?
Yes, so this is on the HRA, and if you want to get to 2.7%, we know that the capital spending public financed by bank loans is 101 million, and we know that the increase on the little table I gave you it shows what the figure in 24-25 was 8.3 million, and it rose only to 11 million, which is an increase of 2.7 million. Okay, 2.7 million increase on 101 million of capital expenditure is a 2.7% implied interest rate. Okay, I'm not saying they've done it, but there's something gone wrong in the calculation. And when we think that in the HRA that should be 5%, because we're borrowing new money, we're having to go out to borrow new money.
At 4.6
it's a long,
plus.
yeah, and it's meant to be at 4.4. There's something gone wrong there. There's something gone wrong.
Yeah, Chairman, I'm happy to circulate the proper calculation. I haven't got a problem with that. So rest assured it's not 2.7%.
Okay, thank you. Other members, I'm going to look to the Deputy Chairman now for the action points that we have got.
These were just brief notes that I copied down. Presumably they're being translated into proper local government speak by he who knows how to do it. The first one was a briefing note on the HRA interests and interest and the interest rates which underlie them. We were just mentioning. Second point was the panel should have visibility of the link advice, which may be available from the governance and auditor doing it in any case. A report on the garden refuse reduction in income and just why it's happening. The fourth point was the fit for the future, exactly how we're incorporating the shortfall into the estimates, whether it's in this year's or next year's estimate. The fifth point was a confidential briefing note for the panel, summarising the finances of our major commercial projects, where it's difficult for us to reconcile the incomes and the expenditure in the information we have, but that's a confidential briefing note. And the sixth point was the SIPVA resilience report and whether that would assist the confidence of the panel in the budget papers. So those are the 6 points which I noted.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy with all of those. And just before we finish, I want to say thank you to Chris for his work, many hours, as well as Andrew coming between his different meetings. The finance team do an exceptional job, having been spread across 2 councils, and that also the staff body that works towards this budget and then delivering it. I want to say thank you to the staff team and those officers that have led this work. Thank you.
Okay. Members, are there any other recommendations? Because I'm of a view that I can't, with my heart, say that Cabinet, with all confidence, can be supporting this without some of this information. And I know you've got to prepare for the purposes of invoicing council taxpayers. So the precept that you're going to determine is fine, isn't it? You've got to do that. But I just wonder if Cabinet need to be asking some of the questions that we've been asking this evening, just to get that clarity. You know, there are differences of opinion around percentage points that could have an impact. There are differences of opinion around the use of earmarked reserves versus unearmarked. That's the language I heard. I, in my heart, can't put my hand on my heart and say, tomorrow night, Cabinet, you should approve all of this because of some of the questions that have been raised tonight. And I'm not being disparaging. I'm not trying to be critical. I just can't confidently do it. And so that's where I'm at. Councillor Rowe?
Chair, in addition to the points that we've already raised, I appreciate that Councillor Corrie gave me some of the areas, but as we said, it raised up to sort of 50% of the proposed deficit. I do think, as a recommendation, that Cabinet should see where those cuts or tax rises are likely to come from, or if they're going to be funded through the deficit, through the reserves. Thank you very much.
But the problem, of course, we've got is you've got a meeting tomorrow night, and it's unreasonable for you to expect officers to be able to provide you any further information from here. But that's where I'm at. Members, before I go to Councillor Corrie, where are you at? I mean, I'm happy to make a formal recommendation if we want to have a binary on it. It's in the Cabinet's gift tomorrow night to accept the papers that are before them or to seek further clarity. One second.
I'm happy with Councillor Willits' suggestions. I wouldn't support what Councillor Rowe has suggested at the moment. I mean, it's too late, and actually Cabinet do have these discussions around these issues. They have lots of meetings around this over the year. So as far as I can tell, they're either on top of it or haven't taken an interest in it, but it's usually the first one. But I think the recommendations for further information are absolutely fine and will help the Scrutiny Committee and members at the budget next month.
Okay, I hear that. I'll come back to that in a second. Councillor Corey.
So for me, I have said I've heard those recommendations. 4 or 5 of them are about sort of technical detail, about giving information to you, helping you understand. I understand the issue with Northern Gateway. I understand the issues around the HRA account. And therefore, I am commending to you this budget. Yes, those extra items will give you extra confidence and understanding and context. But around the major points that have been discussed tonight, I have full confidence in my team and the team that, to be honest, Chris has come here only in the last few years and has helped improve the clarity of our budget setting. And actually, I still see them as a fresher pair of eyes than what we had before. So I'm content with, I've run through it, Chris, to the point of blue murder, really, about the HRA. And that's why we have the review going on. I'm confident of these figures as a budget for this year, and we're setting a balanced budget for this year. I understand what Councillor Rose says. We're not setting a multi-year budget here. That's for the following year, and we do have to set it out as politicians, and we will do that. But we are setting this budget, and I'm clear this budget is balanced, and I've given you some suggestions about where things could go in the future. I don't have to do that at all, but I've given you some tonight. So I'm commending this as a budget that I hope you've scrutinised enough. You understand you need some extra context, but to Councillor Scaldis's points as well, we are working on this day and night to ensure that this is landed on a pin in terms of it being balanced, and we're very clear about the deficits going forward and how they need to be addressed.
Deputy Chairman, help me out here.
I'm not sure I can help you out, Chairman. I mean, there are clearly worries that the panel has. So you don't get a sort of a 10 out of 10 for your budget. We're only in this sort of 7 out of 10. And the question is that good enough? And given the points on which we are talking, it isn't, Cabinet isn't the end of the road with this. I mean, if there are any serious issues which we pick up from these briefing notes the next 2 weeks, we can always bring them up at full council. I mean, it gets more difficult to bring up technical points at full council, but there is that safety valve that if we thought that any of these were really serious issues, we have that option. So perhaps 7 out of 10 is good enough on this occasion.
I mean, I wonder if maybe we could recommend that Cabinet provide this information that we've requested to all members in advance, or as early as feasibly can be done in advance of full council. And, you know, the commercially sensitive stuff can go on the yellow papers, can't they, potentially? I know we can ask for it here, we can have it here, and it's in your gift as to whether you wanted to share that with other members on yellow papers, or a private briefing note. But I saw the leader indicating that we probably need to wrap this.
I think you do. It's been an excellent conversation, and I'll add my thanks to those that Mark has expressed, I hope, for us all. For me, the point would be the same one always. We do work in a very open way, and other members have said more open than we have perhaps in the past. That should help trust. And this is about trust and materiality. In the year ahead, with a glance beyond it, you know, we spent some hours looking at voluminous, better than before information. We've had some illustrations on materiality that some good debates around, for example, interest rates make only a small difference overall. So I share Mark's confidence and the section 151's. And Dennis, maybe it is 7 out of 10. In the world we're in, 7 out of 10 feels kind of all right for me. If we accept the point that Lee made before, which is we, I say we in the narrow sense of administration, but we collectively are on the case of pursuing what we need to do. And I think you should have enough confidence to put this to Cabinet, however qualified, and you share that view because your concerns, important though they are not material in the year ahead, given the scale of the budget and the resources and reserves. Don't want to draw on them, but if we had to, we could.
I think I would like to formally recommend that you, Cabinet, consider sharing the information we've requested here to all members. I think I'd like to make that formal recommendation, and it's in your gift. Do I see anyone in favour of my proposal?
I have worries on 5, the commercial briefing on the. I don't know what would be in it, but it might well. As scrutiny panel, we're entitled to see any information we want. We can ask, and when it can be shown to us, it might be one of those issues where you consider that that it might not be wise to share this information totally. That's your decision, I think.
I accept that on the commercial front. I accept that. Everyone happy?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Chair,
Councillor Rowe.
I'd like to point out that I'm not 100% convinced on this. I'm 100% convinced on that the questions have been answered and will be answered. I believe there's still open questions around the HRA. I think that these points need to be addressed before we recommend this. I won't be supporting recommending this to council at all. I don't think we should. I think we need more time, more information.
I don't think scrutiny is recommending.
That's fine. Okay. I just want to be on record that I'm not happy with this.
We've got questions. We're asking for some action, and we're trying to help members out and be fair to officers and the Cabinet. We can't get this information in the next 24 hours, so it will go to members in advance of full council to help inform them for the budget vote.
It's a decision for Cabinet. That's fine. Yeah.
Chris.
Sorry, from a section 151 perspective, I'd like to go right back to the beginning and Andrew Small's introduction there. I think in the light of what's been said tonight, there are a number of questions raised, and I do accept the concerns raised, long-term materiality around housing revenue account and things like that, which is duly acknowledged by the administration here. But I haven't heard anything here of material consequence to the 25-26 budget to echo what the leader's saying, in effect, that from a section 151 perspective, I'm entirely comfortable that there is absolutely nothing been raised here tonight that could potentially have a material impact on 25-26.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap that there, and we have time. You've been very patient. Chris, by all means, stay and enjoy the party, or if you need to safely make your way home, thank you for your time. Thank you very much, Chris. And anyone else who needs to go. Okay, whistle stop tour. But why not?
Right. As I said, whistle stop tour. Now, has everybody had the one pager I sent through? Right. So I won't go into too much detail on that because there was a few bits that I should have put in there but I didn't. So I'll just cover those and then we can go straight on to questions. So one thing I wanted to talk about was our locality budgets. And as of this evening, the remaining locality budget to align is just over £21,000. So some of the things that we've been spending our money on has been the food bank. We've been putting towards various festivals and sort of community fun days, installation of Wi-Fi in the Layman Community Hub, e-cargo hub for Wivenhoe, Newtown Community Day, St Anne's Fun Day, roof repairs and disabled compliant doors to give wheelchair access in Tiptree, and various other things. So there's a little bit more to be dished out. Only a few days left to do it, so if you haven't spent all yours, get on with it, me included.
It's probably worth saying that actually locality budgets are a great example of how you can leverage money. I gave £500 to a parish council. They leveraged 29,500 for brand new play equipment. So it's an good opportunity for councillors who know their communities to help leverage additional monies.
Yeah, it is. A brilliant initiative that we have to be able to hand this money out. So I completely sort of omitted a line on heritage in here, which is obviously a large part of my portfolio. So we've Obviously, you all know we've had, 8 million in funding for Jumbo, which is absolutely fantastic. So I'm really thrilled that they've got that, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the plans come through for that. We've had Holy Trinity. We've got a partnership with St Helena Hospice now, so that's fantastic. And we've had roof works and facelift of holly trees. And I've also asked for us to have a public consultation on holly trees, because I want us to have a refocus on that museum, because I think it's just a little bit of a mishmash, and I'd like to actually see it sort of have a particular purpose. So I've asked that to go out to public consultation in a similar way we did the Natural History Museum, to see what the residents panel and the youth panel think about what we could do with holly trees in the future. We've had higher footfall at the castle this year, so due to exhibitions which have been funded by the Arts Council. We've had the puppets, we had Thunderbirds, so my husband was really excited about that, and Gaia, which was marvellous, I thought, and obviously the Gladiators exhibition. And we're having works to start on the conservation of the castle roof, having established the cause of that. So obviously a lot of capital works, we've already touched on those in the budget, how we can be putting a bit more money into our buildings potentially. And yes, we've got a lot of obviously other works going on around the town centre at the moment. We've got the Britannia car park, sort of scheme of the Priory Gardens, and there's a few concerns that would need to be addressed on that. We can talk about that if anybody's got any questions on that. And hit me with some questions.
All right then, I've got questions, but I don't want to be greedy. Let's have one from Councillor Rowe, let's have one from Councillor Appleton, and then I'll ask my three.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point on, I suppose it's not really a question, it's more sort of an observation around the community budgets that we have. Sometimes the app that we use in order to upload the funds is very annoying. I've had a couple of and look, don't get me wrong, the conversations I've had with the staff, absolutely fabulous. They've resolved all the issues almost immediately, but it can be somewhat frustrating to put in all of the details, explain exactly what you're trying to put the money in, and then have it, well, not necessarily rejected, but find out that it's been, I don't know, allocated slightly skewed in the wrong place or something. Is there any plans or opportunity for you guys to look at that and try to redevelop it in the future?
Obviously, our whole sort of digital offering is being looked at by Councillor Jay to go through and make sure all our systems are fit for the future, as it were. But yeah, I'm in agreement. You get halfway through or something goes wrong. There doesn't need to be any particular way of saving it and going back. And you need like a little address book in there sometimes, don't you, as well? So you can click on sort of you constantly give to a particular organisation, if that could be a feature. So we can definitely ask them to have a look at that and see if we can get a more user-friendly system, I think, because I've been moaning today at work about they're bringing in a new train booking system, and we're not looking forward to that. So I understand the pain.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was regarding community safety, which is, I know, within your remit, and there was an article in the Gazette yesterday about a 20% uplift in the last 2 years of weapon possession offences in Colchester. Now, that sounds quite scary, but obviously that was against a backdrop of up 40% in Essex as a whole. What comfort can you give us that this is, being looked at and being taken seriously?
It's better detection, it's better policing. They're actually being a lot more proactive, because obviously we've had Operation Grip, a couple of areas in Colchester concentrating on hotspots that we know, and it's actually, yes, we've had the knife arches coming in, and it's basically a lot more proactive policing. So knife crime is actually, I believe, falling, so they're actually catching the people with the knives before they actually get to do anything. And the important thing to remember is that the most likely person to be a victim of someone carrying a knife is themselves. So, you know, and the more people we can catch and stop them, and also with education as well, we can actually help try and drive those numbers down so that there are less people carrying knives and less likely to either end up injuring themselves, being injured, or, you know, injuring other people. But that's not to say, obviously, that there isn't necessarily still an issue with knife crime in Colchester and in Essex. So the police are constantly sort of, you know, updating their policies and procedures to make sure that they keep on top of these things, and bringing in more funding, obviously, and we also bring in more funding as well from the Police, Fire and Crime Commission, so that we can have more of these hotspot areas and concentrate particular antisocial behaviours and just keep the pressure on, keep people safe.
One follow-up. So it's better supervision and enforcement, being proactive, rather than, you know, more injuries, fatalities, or anything like that?
Sorry. Yeah, not necessarily an increase in people actually carrying knives, but an increase in the police detecting people, and the way they've changed the way they actually the way that they look for the likely people who might be carrying knives. They're actually being more proactive, stop and search type things, and yeah, basically better detection leading to better protection.
Okay.
Sounds like that. Yeah, that is.
If I may, a few. I mean, firstly, I wish you well with the Natural History Museum, and there is an example of how, you know, maintenance perhaps let us down, and we've now got a situation where it's inaccessible. But I know that, you know, the museum services are looking at how we can enhance that facility, which is much loved by many of our young people in Colchester. So good luck with that one. The St Botolph's Square and redevelopment and enhancement plans, I won't go into the conversation about car parks versus public space. That's not for here right now, but I am interested in the historic, in fact, the country's first St Augustinian Priory, which is not technically owned by us, is it? But then that has some maintenance issues as well at the moment, but it also has an opportunity between us and the owner and this levelling up fund, in which we're seeking to potentially create a new walking route from the station through it to get through to Priory Street and into Fairside area and all of that, which sounds great. But at the moment, the area is locked off at night, isn't it? And we've had this conversation previously with others around locked churchyards and churchyards as potentially attracting ASP. And I just want to make sure that, you know, in the conversations we are working out how we can have an improved lighting scheme. You know, really an opportunity to not just create a safe space, but actually put a spotlight on that heritage asset. But if we are going to design a new walking route, how will that operationally work? I just want to make sure that that's on your list of questions to officers and architects who design this stuff. Secondly, obviously we had the very exciting news that Dr. Philip Crummy is now an MBE, 53 years serving Colchester in the country at archaeology. I just wondered if you're going to be able to give him a red ribbon to cut on lighting up something or exposing the Red Lion mosaic, for example, that I really think we still should work with our friends in Red Lion shopping precinct to get done. And it would be quite fitting if Philip Crummy could be the one that could cut the ribbon on that. And then thirdly, I note in your briefing one pager that there is going to be a new EDI strategy, and I just want to know what that might look like in the context that the leader of the free world is challenging discourse around this. And obviously, I'm, you know, compliant with equalities legislation and human rights legislation in everything that I do. But if you've got the leader of the free world challenging the discourse, are you potentially investing too much energy into something that the views of the world are changing on? Or are you going to ignore him and do what you want to do? There you are. 3 areas, please.
Right, thank you. Right, so with St Botolph's, currently the architects and the master planners, they are still planning to lock the Priory Gardens at night, but they've spoken to the street care team about future possibilities of leaving it open. So with the lighting, that sort of remains a bit more unclear. The previous proposal focused sort of like more on feature lighting, so like we've got with the castle lighting up, rather than sort of a safety. So it wasn't a means of accessing or making it safer to walk through at night. So you know, the idea of leaving the gardens open would obviously necessitate some sort of more safety lighting, you know, along the pathways and things like that. So with regards to that, there are some concerns that you'd need to address before you could think about installing that sort of thing, you know, light pollution affecting the residents in the area, also the resident wildlife in the area, sort of like bat disturbance, and obviously Historic England would have concerns and would have to give their approval, and obviously we'd have to look at all the costings of that. So they're still looking at the lighting as an enhancement to the whole St Botolph's Quarter scheme, and a pre-application planning meeting should be happening this week, which should hopefully give us a clearer steer on what their thinking is and what we do with the Priory. So, and obviously, you know, we've just launched a public consultation as well with regards to that, so people can have their say on what they'd actually like to see happen with the area. So your second
Philip
point,
Crummey.
Philip Crummey, yes. Yeah, we've been a bit lax pushing forward on the Red Line mosaic. So I am actually arranging a meeting with Martin next week. I've asked him for a coffee and a catch-up, or a cup of tea actually, so I don't drink coffee. And yeah, well, I'll push to see what we can do, where we are with that, what we can help with. You know, if it's going to be a bit late for anybody to push their locality budget towards it next week, but perhaps that's something, if it needs a little bit of an uplift, some... If we can get it on display, then yeah, I think Philip, yeah, should be first in line to get that open. But if that doesn't come to fruition, then I'm sure, you know, perhaps something around St Botolph's, if we get that, because obviously, you know, it's that pathway's been cut off recently because of erosion, so we're fixing that. So maybe we could have a grand reopening of that pathway or something like that. But we would definitely find some way of celebrating. I mean, it was lovely to see the plaque on the wall at the Colchester Archaeological Trust, but unfortunately, by the time they've got it printed, he hadn't actually had his MBE, so they've still got to update that bit on his plaque. And finally, yes, the EDI action plan. So let me just get to the rest.
Sorry, I've done it, haven't I? Equality, diversity and inclusion.
Yes. Now, yeah, I'm not one to take too much notice of the man over the pond when it comes to his views on equality and diversity, because I think, yes, he doesn't align with my way of thinking. But yeah, we introduced our new policy back in 2024. So obviously, yes, January 25 to December 27 is our new action plan to be published. So we're going to be having quarterly meetings for the EDI working group to discuss the ongoing concerns, issues and events, to review the policies and the equality impact assessments, and we're training EDI champions to support colleagues and generally look around those things. But yeah, I think Colchester should do its own thing. I don't believe we should.
So is this something for staff and partners, or is this also by extension a cultural offering that will be outwardly projected and that our council taxpayers will experience?
Yeah, it's mainly a lot of around the staffing. So, you know, what we do within our buildings. So we've been introducing sort of sanitary products in the female and gender neutral bathrooms in the hub and the Rowan House, and yet multi-faith rooms available for people to use. But not just for faith, but for quiet space. So it's inclusive. If you need a space to go and be quiet, whether you want to pray or whether you just want to contemplate, then that's a space for you to use. And yeah, and we're sharing this with Colchester Borough Homes. We're sharing it with our partners, but it's not sort of something we're pushing on the public as such. It is something more for the council to actually implement amongst its staff and make sure we're fair across the board to everybody, and give everybody as much of an equal opportunity as we can.
Thank you very much. Members, Councillor Scordis.
Thank you. Hopefully be quick. Yeah, I mean, on the locality budget issue, I think that there's 21,000 to be spent. I think if what's not spent could be allocated to what you said on the mosaic. But first question is antisocial behaviour. As we get to the warmer months, we know that it's going to become a problem again, whether that's street drinkers or some teenagers causing problems. I'm wondering if we're looking at a strategy to deal with that. Funnily enough, they're not out in the rain today. And the second one is around communities. It's probably not one to answer today. In fact, it might be something for scrutiny to look at in the future. It would be really, because we do have a substantial team there, it would be really good to have a look at, over the last few years, the work they've done, the successes they've had, where have they been targeting, where do they need to target next, and where are they struggling to get those successes. So, for example, could Greenstead or Newtown be an area, or maybe somewhere I just haven't mentioned at all. I think that'd be really helpful because I think they do vital work, but there may be gaps that we can help scrutinise and make sure they're more effective.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, with the antisocial behaviour, obviously we know there are hotspots, and particularly we've had a big hotspot in North Station Road at the moment. So we've actually installed 2 new cameras at Middleborough, and we're looking actually to extend that further down the road because it's a matter of how far the system actually goes at the moment. So we actually do need to get the funding and Essex County Council permission to put the trunking further down the road so we can get cameras going further down there. So we should hopefully be getting more funding from the Police, Fire and Crime Commission for that. As you know, the police regularly hold action days with us to patrol the town centre with our wardens, and we've recently introduced handheld terminals so that they can actually do the fines on the spot rather than having to come back to the town hall to write them up and then go back, and obviously they may well have disappeared by that point, so we can actually do on the spot fines now and then sort of try and encourage them to move. One thing that's been in conversation with the Colchester Business Against Crime, myself and the leader have regular meetings with them with regards to how to deal with the street drinkers. Is there used to be a space down on Cowdrey Avenue, it was called the April Centre, where they could actually go and drink and congregate and chat, and they haven't got that space anymore, and obviously that they want to be somewhere that's near enough to the public amenities so they can buy their alcohol or whatever and food, but obviously hanging around outside Trilogy isn't a good look for the town. So we're actively sort of trying to find another solution to sort of give them the space to move them off the streets, keep them safe, but also give them that space to do what they want, because some of these people obviously they're not homeless. I think we haven't got that many genuine homeless people, have we? Most of them do actually already have a home. So it's a lifestyle choice, unfortunately, and every time the wardens encounter them, they give them all the advice and all the places they can go to get help. But with many things, you can lead a horse to water, but so that's something that's ongoing. And with regard to the communities, obviously we've got the Community Safety Partnership, and got some great sort of outcomes with them. We've got some new partners coming in with that as well, like Essex Mental Health and Essex Sexual Health Services, Colchester Specialist Mental Health Teams, and housing associations coming in with that. So they're all doing some great collaborative work to try and make Colchester a safer place and obviously a better community sort of place. And where are we with the CVS stuff with Essex?
Essex County Council are doing a different kind of procurement option with the community voluntary sector across the whole of Essex. They're in kind of phase 2 of their procurement at the moment. So previously there was a number of infrastructure organisations, a number of kind of delivery organisations. What they're looking to do now is move to this is before local government reorganisation was kind of on the table, but what they wanted was one infrastructure organisation over the whole of the county. So it's less of a postcode lottery really of the kind of level of service you got. And they are phasing that in over a number of years. So we're now in phase 2 of that particular procurement. if it hasn't come out to you now, it's any day, all members will be getting an update on that particular process. You can see exactly who's been procured into what part of the system as it stands now. If you haven't had that, it's literally imminent.
Okay, the last question is from Councillor Willits.
Can I ask whether you can use your good offices to drag the Crime and Disorder Committee into the modern age? It seems very set in its ways. You will recall that we had great difficulty in getting it to take an interest in the 15.2% increase in shoplifting in the town. The other area which causes great concern is the e-fraud and the contracts, where we know they're escalating massively, just from talking with sort of neighbours and friends, yet the Crime and Disorder Committee refuses to believe that there are such crimes. And I just wondered whether you can use your good offices to try and bring it into the partnership.
Sorry, the Community and Safety Partnership, not Crime and Disorder Committee.
Well, yeah, but Crime and Disorder Committee reviews the Community Safety Partnership, which doesn't really want to focus on some of the modern crimes. And if I can just give you a very quick example, I have a cubbyhole, they call it an office, in Colchester, which opens at 9 o'clock in the mornings. Some rotter got hold of my credit card and ordered £150 worth of groceries to be delivered before 8:30, and it was handed over to someone who looked as though he was owning the place, standing outside. When it eventually came through onto my card, Essex Police were not interested in it. The card was issued by a London bank at 1 Holborn, and they said report it to them. So my theft in Colchester, which was a sort of e-scam, because they used my card that they got hold of the number, is actually reported to the Met, not to Colchester. And I suspect that this is sort of fairly endemic. There are lots of people in Colchester are being defrauded by these clever contracts, but it's being reported as a crime in London or Manchester or wherever the bank's card issuing centre is located. And I think we should be sort of upping the ante to try and track what is going on and the extent to which Colchester residents are suffering these crimes, and asking our own police to take a greater interest rather than just shuffling it off onto whichever bank somewhere else in the country issued the card or the cheque.
Can you take that away as a potential conversation? Is that okay?
Definitely. I mean, I think we need a lot more education around sort of online types of fraud, because it's very easy to be lulled by these people that phone you, particularly, the types of romance type frauds you get as well, the long con, those sorts of things. I think we really need a lot more education, and particularly for elderly people as well. I think it's quite difficult for them to discern what's real and what's not. That those of us that are a bit younger, we're a little bit more savvy when it comes to a lot of online stuff. Take everything with a pinch of salt, and if it sounds too good to be true, then it is, sort of thing. But yeah, we do need a lot more education. But yeah, we can definitely take that forward to the partners, and I think we got possibly do some of the education as part of the Health and Wellbeing Board that we've got coming up soon. It's beginning soon as well. So all that sort of health and wellbeing, digital education, making sure our residents are as fully informed as they possibly can be about all the pitfalls and positives as well that can be out there on the internet and things. But yeah, we will take that forward.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming and bearing with us. And so we can have further scrutiny of your work. Thank you. Before we go home, folks, we just need to get clarity from the clerk on the work programme for the remainder of the year.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think committee members will be happy to see. I don't have much to report, just to note that we've split the 11th February meeting. We've got a new meeting date. In addition to that date, we've now got the 27th of February, and we've split up the items that were on the 11th February agenda between the two.
That seems entirely appropriate, and we're not in the town hall on Valentine's Day night, which we have been in the past, so we can all enjoy a romantic February. Thank you very much. Safe journeys home, everyone.